Dia de los Muertos is one of the most important holidays in Mexico. It is the Day of the Dead, when we take the time to commemorate loved ones who have passed away. It is when we welcome back the souls of our deceased relatives for a brief reunion that includes food, drink, music, and celebration. It is said that the gates of heaven open at midnight on November 1st, and the spirits of children can first rejoin their families for 24 hours for Dia de los Angelitos, Day of the Little Angels. At midnight on November 2nd, adult spirits can do the same. We treat the deceased as our honored guests and leave out offerings at grave sites or on altars, also called ofrendas. Ofrendas can be decorated with candles, bright yellow marigolds, photos, and their favorite foods. On the last day of Dia de los Muertos, we come together, dressed up with calavera or skeleton-painted faces, and have parades in the streets. My family is very religious, always attending Mass on Sundays, and of course celebrating this holy day of obligation. This year was especially important since we were honoring loved ones who have passed away due to the pandemic. I was in the church choir, and on the final day of celebration, I stayed behind to rehearse music for tonight's music program with my friend Rosa. The plan was to meet everyone at the cemetery in an hour. Before leaving, my mom told me to be careful since all the spirits would be out tonight. I didn't blame her. My family is very superstitious. As much as I love this holiday, it also creeped me out. Thinking about potentially welcoming back the souls of murderers and convicts, ghosts like La Planchada, and the most feared of all, of course, La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman, a soul in eternal sorrow for drowning her children and known to kidnap others at night. Growing up, my abuela told me that La Llorona was once a woman named Maria who drowned her children in a river after her husband left her for a younger woman. She then drowned herself, but was told she won't be allowed into heaven until she can find her missing children. Apparently, this was mere legend with the latest Hollywood films, but that didn't make it any less scary or real. When I checked the time, I realized I was cutting it short, so I had to leave. I waited half an hour for my friend who never showed up, which really pissed me off. She's always so tardy. It was already dark as I walked outside. I cursed under my breath. For some reason, I couldn't shake off this feeling of dread as I made my way to the cemetery. Passing by everyone dressed in full costume was starting to scare me, and I started questioning whether or not they were dead or alive. So I took the shortcut through the forest to avoid any and all interaction. There came a moment when I thought to myself, I'm all alone. What if something happens? So I started running at the speed of light. I just wanted to be home with hot cocoa, but the night had other plans for me. The moment the world stopped for me was when I heard something in the distance. Something like a weeping, a woman crying. And you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out who it was. La Llorona was around. Now, the feeling of listening to those creepy stories about a dead woman is far beyond less terrifying than finding her. Yeah, I found her. Or maybe she found me. I'm not totally sure. Because I spotted something in the distance, a white silhouette that didn't have its feet on the ground. The shape started to get closer. And tell me, what kind of glowing figure appears in the middle of nowhere to chase you? Because you can bet that it was after me specifically, since I was all alone. I booked it, escaping the forest and yelling at the top of my lungs trying to find another living being, but having zero luck. It felt as if I was running so slowly and wasn't getting away fast enough.
Hija mía, te encontré. Ven aquí con mami.
My blood rushed to my head, and I saw my whole life flash before my eyes. When I close my eyes, I can still see her face coming at me full speed, claiming me as one of her dead children.
I've been waiting for you. No tengas miedo. We can finally be together forever.
I prayed to all the saints I knew to intercede for me, but none came. The wailing was so close to me, and the thought that she was just a tug away from finally having me made me join in duet. Now, what I will tell you is not made up. It's the reason why I fervently believe that the one that appeared out of thin air was La Llorona. At one point, when the moon was glowing, I was able to see a little better. My only thought was to get the hell out of there. And that's when I felt it.
Eres mía.
The wailing stopped, and a cold hand gently touched my shoulder. It was enough to make my soul jump out of my body. I screamed, God knows I did it, almost exploding my lungs, and I didn't care whether I was on the right track to the cemetery or not. I truly felt her dark presence. I told myself not to turn around. But my reflexes betrayed me, and when I did, this is hard for me to say. I saw her. Her jaw was surprisingly low, and from her eye sockets flowed a blackish liquid. She was a tall, thin spirit, surprisingly beautiful, with long flowing black hair. She was wearing a white gown and veil.
Mi hermosa hija.
She made this horrible, piercing shriek that I hear on quiet nights even to this day, and started wailing again. I tripped, trying to run away, and when I twisted my ankle, I thought that was the end of it all. I closed my eyes and cried out in pain as she grabbed me by my hair and started dragging me back into the forest.
We will be together forever, hija mía.
But out of sheer luck, maybe from one of the saints I prayed to, she loosened her grip, and her wailing turned into only a whimper. I opened my eyes.
Deja mi nieta en paz, demonio.
I'd recognize that voice anywhere. I turned around.
Abuela?
Tears rolled down my face as I stared at my grandma who had passed away months ago due to COVID. I missed her so much. I hugged her while thanking her for saving my life. Go to your mother now. She is waiting for you. I reluctantly let go of her and continued running until I reached the gates of the cemetery and ran straight into my mother's arms.
Oh, Dios mío, mija. ¿Qué pasó?
My parents saw me scared to death. I explained what happened to me. My mom started crying. They talked about how irresponsible it was to leave me alone, but smiled when I told them about Abuela paying me a visit. I looked around and asked them where Rosa was, and they looked very confused. Rosa's parents told me they dropped her off at the church for rehearsal. As soon as they learned that she never made it inside, we rushed over to the church in hopes of finding her there. And in the distance, I could hear the wails again. I had a horrible sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I tried to stay optimistic. But when we arrived, we found Rosa face down in the fountain in front of the church. And on top of her, La Llorona was holding her head underwater. When we approached the fountain though, La Llorona looked up at us angrily. Then, in a split second, she made this blood-curdling scream and vanished. Rosa's father ran up to his daughter's limp body and immediately performed CPR. Luckily, Rosa was okay. If we had showed up even a second later, I'm sure this would be a different story. So, I urge you, beware of ghosts like La Llorona on El Día de los Muertos. The river flowed silently under the cloak of the night, its inky waters concealing an unspeakable horror. An unsuspecting man walking his dog by the river's edge stumbled upon something that should have been remained hidden in its depths. As his eyes widened in disbelief, a guttural scream tore through the stillness of the night, echoing off the trees and disturbing the tranquility of the village. Suddenly, like gruesome apparitions emerging from the river's abyss, the lifeless bodies of men began to surface, carried by the unforgiving current. Their pale, bloated faces stared lifelessly into the void, their cold, unseeing eyes bearing witness to the horrors they had endured. But the tale of terror began days earlier when a group of friends, George, Alex, and Matt, successful businessmen, had gathered at a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the village. Their pockets were heavy with the spoils of a lucrative deal, a new construction project that promised to bring them even greater wealth. Amid the flickering candlelight, they reveled in the lively atmosphere, their laughter and clinking glasses a testament to their success. With each drink, their voices and laughter grew louder, and their inhibitions faded away like smoke in the night. As the hours passed and the night deepened, the group of friends fueled by alcohol and arrogance found themselves entangled in a web of lust and desire. The women who had also sought refuge in the dimly lit establishment were the objects of their lustful pursuits. These men, too drunk to care about decency or empathy, were harsh and demanding in their pursuit of pleasure, treating the women with little regard for their feelings or dignity. The men's arrogance knew no bounds, and they flaunted their wealth with arrogance, offering to pay for the women's companionship, their voices dripping with condescension. It was at this juncture that Suyu, their friend, sat with them. Her radiant smile and ethereal beauty caught their attention, and her sudden appearance breathed an uncanny life into the room, dispelling the tension that had lingered in the air. George, ensnared by Suyu's enchanting allure, found himself irresistibly drawn to her. Her beauty was unparalleled, a vision of perfection that defied belief. In his eyes, she was the epitome of desirability, an unattainable dream come to life. The group of friends, now accompanied by their chosen women, left the bar and made their way to the hotel next door where they were staying. As they parted ways to their respective rooms, their anticipation hung heavy in the air. But as the night deepened, George, who had been captivated by Tsuyu, found himself alone with her in his room. The allure of her beauty was a siren's call, and he couldn't resist it. As he began undressing himself, Tsuyu climbed on top of him and slowly revealed herself. George, who had closed his eyes, was enjoying every sensation until he got a glimpse of her true form. The man's eyes, filled with terror, met hers. He opened his mouth to let out a blood-curdling scream. Then her skeletal hand pressed against his trembling mouth, silencing him. Her fingers bore the essence of death, a death that would soon become intimately acquainted with his very soul, and then with a malevolence that transcended the mortal realm. She sealed their dreadful connection with a kiss. It was not the kiss of lovers, but the kiss of an entity that feasted upon life itself. As their lips met, a chilling darkness seemed to emanate from her, enveloping the man in a deadly embrace. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever known. It was a kiss that sapped not just the warmth from his body, but the very essence of his being. His eyes widened with unimaginable agony, and he convulsed in an attempt to escape. The room seemed to close in around them, the air heavy with the weight of impending doom. The man's once vibrant complexion drained of color, leaving behind a lifeless husk. His screams, at first filled with terror, were gradually silenced as the last of his vitality were cruelly drained away. In those moments, the man's existence was extinguished. His once animated body now lay limp, a mere vessel drained of its life force. Suyu, her lips still tainted with the essence of stolen life, withdrew from the lifeless form before her. The scream had reverberated through the hotel. The friends rushed to the source of the sound, their hearts pounding with dread. Before them stood Suyu, or what had once been Suyu, now transformed into the ghastly figure. Her skeletal form sent shivers of dread down their spines, and the realization of their impending doom washed over them like a tidal wave. Beside her lay the lifeless body of their friend, drained of all vitality, a mere shell of his former self. The truth was clear now. They were in the presence of a malevolent force beyond their comprehension. She was the Llorona. Centuries ago, Tsuyu, once a mortal woman, had been married to a man who had betrayed her in the cruelest way imaginable. Unable to bear children, Tsuyu's husband had sold her into a wretched life in a brothel. A decision that would seal her fate. In her darkest hour, Tsuyu had found solace in the friendship of another woman named Kion, and together they had hatched a plan to escape their miserable existence. But Tsuyu was once again betrayed. Kion, driven by her own desires and ambitions, slept with her husband. She revealed their escape plans to the very man who had sold her into this life. That night, as Tsuyu slept, her husband had snuffed out her life, his hands stained with her blood. Her lifeless body had been cast into the very river that now flowed silently beside the hotel, becoming one with the souls of other unfortunate women who had met a similar fate. In that watery grave, their spirits had merged, giving birth to the vengeful yokai known as Llorona. Fueled by centuries of torment and anger, Llorona had dedicated herself to exacting vengeance upon the men who wronged her and for women who had met a similar fate as hers. Her methods of retribution were as varied as they were horrifying, each tailored to reflect the depth of her anger and the darkness of her past. As the men quivered with fear, the women who had accompanied them stepped forward, their eyes devoid of emotion. With unnatural strength, the women held the lifeless bodies down, their eyes glazed over with a sinister resolve. One by one, Llorona exacted her horrifying retribution upon the men, their deaths agonizing and gruesome, their pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. For Alex, she embraced him with a bone-crushing hug, her bony fingers tightening around his body, crushing bones and organs until his life was extinguished. His body contorted in agony as his very essence was drained away. Then she turned her attention to Matt, her grip on his head unyielding. She squeezed until the world around him faded into a suffocating darkness, stealing away his sight, then his hearing, and finally, his ability to breathe. He was left to suffocate in a nightmarish void of his own making. As the men's lifeless bodies lay on the bed, the women who had accompanied them stepped forward once more, their faces still devoid of emotion. They had been complicit in this ritual, and they now bore the grim responsibility of disposing their remains. With a grim determination, they carried the lifeless bodies to the river, where the souls of the unfortunate women who had met a similar fate as Tsuyu awaited them. There, beneath the moonless sky, they joined the legacy of the yokai known as Llorona, their actions forever bound to the darkness that had consumed them all. In a quiet rural village in Beijing was a place where ancient folklore and reality blurred, particularly as Chinese New Year neared. Red lanterns danced in the winter breeze, their glow competing with the distant pops of firecrackers and the aroma of incense. Li, a young schoolteacher, had recently arrived. Her eyes filled with the wonder of the village's mysterious aura, so different from the bustling city she'd left. As the villagers prepared for the new year, Li began to sense an unspoken tension, a caution in their laughter and hushed conversations. Her neighbor, Old Chen, a man whose face bore the marks of time and wisdom, often watched her very closely. One morning, he offered her a cryptic message. "The shadow fears the light of 1,000 truths. What is hidden in plain sight holds the key, but only the seeker who listens to silence will find it." Li pondered his words, their meaning deep. She smiled and waved goodbye. At the new school, everything went well for Li. The children, especially Wei, a bright and sweet boy, brought joy to her days with his small morning gifts. A hand-drawn picture, a ripe apple. However, as the new year drew closer, Li began to feel an overwhelming fatigue that clouded her mind and weakened her body. It was as if a heavy blanket had been thrown over her very spirit. The nights, however, were the worst. As soon as Li closed her eyes, she would find herself plunged into a realm of shadows and haunting dreams that left her tossing and turning. Morning would bring no relief. Each day, Li awoke feeling more depleted than before. Her energy sapped, her vitality drained. Even Wei began to notice the change in his beloved teacher. His face was full of concern as he handed her the morning's gift, his usual bright chatter replaced by hesitant words and worried glances. The villagers watched her with a mix of worry and an unspoken recognition, as if they knew the cause of her affliction. The festive air of the New Year celebrations now seemed to mock her inner turmoil. The shadows in her dreams became more menacing, the whispers more insistent, hinting at an unseen force seeking to claim her. Amidst this growing unease, it was Old Chen who finally stepped forth. One evening, he beckoned Li to join him near the path that led into the dense forest. Old Chen shared the legend that had been whispered in hushed tones for centuries. The Jiangxi is a cursed entity born from improper burial and dark sorcery. Clad in the robes of a Qing dynasty official, it is trapped between life and death. He spoke of how the Jiangxi, driven by an insatiable hunger for qi, the vital life force, preyed upon the living under the cover of night. Old Chen continued. The Jiangxi was once a corrupt official, punished by celestial forces, condemned to roam eternally, bound to the shadows. Li listened, a chill coursing through her despite the mild evening air. The pieces of her own experience began to align with a terrifying clarity. The unexplainable fatigue, the nightmarish visions, the villagers' guarded glances. Many years ago, the Jiangxi brought calamity upon this village. It was sealed in the old temple deep in the forest, a place now shunned and feared. But some bonds, even those forged by ancient rites, can weaken with time. Feeling a profound sense of foreboding, Li returned home, too drained and paranoid to join the New Year's celebrations. The lively sounds of the celebration, music, laughter, the crackle of fireworks, drifted through her window as she lay down. A restless sleep overtook her. Completely out of it, she began to sleepwalk, drawn towards the village square where the festivities were in full swing. Guided by an unseen force, she walked through the quiet streets, moving away from the safety of her home towards the heart of the festivities. The village square was alive with vibrant colors and lights. Lanterns swayed gently in the night breeze, casting a warm glow over the faces of the villagers as they celebrated. Dragon dancers weaved through the crowd, their movements both graceful and powerful.
But amidst this scene of joy, villagers noticed Lee. Her eyes vacant, her step slow and unsteady, as she moved through the crowd like a ghost. It was then, at the peak of the celebration, that a sudden eerie hush fell over the village square. The music faltered, the laughter died down, and the crowd parted in a mix of confusion and fear. From the shadows at the edge of the square, a figure emerged, the Jiangshi. It emerged from the shadows. Its skin was ghastly pale, almost translucent, stretched over its skeletal frame. Its eyes sunken and devoid of life, glowed with a malevolent red light that seemed to pierce the soul. It was clad in the rotting remnants of a Qing dynasty official's robe. Its movements were grotesque and unnatural. Each step was accompanied by the sickening crack of stiff, unyielding joints, echoing eerily through the silent village square. As the villagers, led by old Chen, ran over and formed a protective circle around Li, the Jiangshi fixated on them with a predatory gaze. It let out a guttural growl, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the underworld, chilling the blood of all who heard it. Finally, Li woke up from her trance. With a sudden jerky motion, the Jiangshi lunged at the nearest villager, its movements swift and horrifying. The villager, paralyzed by fear, could only scream as the creature's cold, dead hands closed around his throat. The Jiangshi's touch was like ice, draining the life force from its victim in a matter of seconds. The villager's skin turned ashen, his eyes wide with terror before he slumped to the ground, lifeless. Amidst this tense standoff, a small figure pushed through the crowd. It was Wei, clutching something tightly in his hand as he made his way towards Li. In his eyes was a mix of fear and courage. Reaching Li, Wei extended his hand, revealing a special talisman written in chicken's blood.
Teacher Li, my grandmother said this has been in our family for generations. It's supposed to protect against evil spirits.
Li, taken aback by Wei's bravery, took the gift. It was cool to the touch, and as her fingers closed around it, a strange sensation coursed through her. The Jiangshi turned its malevolent gaze upon them. It moved with a ghastly swiftness, its body seeming to glide over the ground, unhindered by the laws of the living. The red glow in its eyes intensified, casting a sinister light on its decaying face. The talisman began to glow, its light a stark contrast to the darkness that emanated from the Jiangshi. The creature hissed, a sound that was both a wail of anger and a cry of pain as the light from the talisman seared it like fire. The Jiangshi recoiled but did not retreat, its desire to consume life force overcoming its aversion to the light. Old Chen, seizing the moment, led the villagers in a final desperate chant. The combined forces created an invisible barrier, a shield of light and ancient magic that the Jiangshi could not penetrate. The creature let out a series of horrifying shrieks, its body contorting in agony as the light burned its flesh. Its movements became erratic, a dance of pain and rage, before it finally turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing into the night from which it had come. The villagers stood in a stunned silence, the echoes of the Jiangshi screams still ringing in their ears. They had faced an unspeakable horror and had emerged victorious, but the night had left its mark on their souls. Li, holding the still glowing talisman, felt a mix of relief and sorrow. She looked down at Wei, his face pale but his eyes still brave. "You saved us, Wei. You saved us all," she whispered. As the villagers slowly came to terms with what had happened, they resumed their celebrations, but the joy was now tempered with a sense of solemnity. Li, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and belonging, joined in the celebrations. She knew that her life would never be the same. She had faced the shadows of the past and found a light that would guide her in the days to come.
Scotland's relentless cold, rain, and greyness had done little to impress Owen so far. It felt unfair that 400 years ago, his ancestors had chosen to depart for the New World. And now he found himself stuck in this foreign land, attempting to enjoy a cigarette outside the only pub in town. His girlfriend, Mariana, had convinced him to return to his homeland in the name of exploring his roots. Personally, he considered it a missed opportunity for a perfectly good vacation. Mariana, however, appeared to be having the time of her life. She had an insatiable fascination with conspiracy theories, and Owen suspected that the allure of his family's Loch Ness connection played a more significant role in this trip than any half-hearted pursuit of self-discovery. There she was, as cheerful as ever, having a conversation with a man who had clearly indulged in several pints.
There's just no other explanation for it.
He drawled in a thick local accent.
Nessie must be back. What else could make that many people disappear around the loch?
How many people are missing? Mariana's eyes widened with fear, yet beneath the surface, Owen detected a hint of morbid fascination. His thoughts drifted while they continued to talk about the recent missing persons cases, until he was jolted back into the present by Mariana's hand tugging at his sleeve. Owen, we have to go. 4 people have gone missing this month, all around the loch. This could really be something. She continued without waiting for his answer. I have to see it. Let's go right now. Rory says he'll take us. Rory, a homeless man they had met earlier, extended an invitation with a turn of his head. Owen, reluctant but intrigued, found himself with no compelling reason to decline. The rain eased into a gentle drizzle as Rory led the way. Mariana continued to bombard their guide with questions, while Owen remained silent. Approaching the water's edge, the loch's eerie stillness draped their surroundings in an unsettling, foreboding aura. Their guide, seemingly unfazed, continued to lead them deeper into the heart of the uncertainty. The trio moved with cautious determination, every step echoing with an unspoken sense of foreboding. Amidst the unsettling silence, Owen grappled with the thought of whether it had been sufficient time to propose they head back when he was interrupted by a sound. It was like a whine. It was a strange sound, long and low and mournful. Owen desperately tried to convince himself that it was merely the wind rustling through the trees. Rory froze. What is it? Mariana hissed in a harsh whisper. Rory looked at her. Until now, he had been relaxed, but now he seemed genuinely petrified. If this was all some kind of hoax, then the man deserved an Oscar for his performance. Maybe it's time to head back, Owen said. Someone had to be the voice of reason. Mariana grabbed his arm though, tugging at him and looking up at him with a disappointed expression. We can't leave now. Not when we finally heard something, she whined. Come on, just a few more minutes. Owen rolled his eyes, but he gave in to her request like he always did. Their companion remained silent, focused on the mournful wail's haunting melody. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings with intense concentration. Only a few seconds passed between the thought that maybe they really were in danger and the beast moving into their line of sight. It was impossibly fast, just a dark shape cutting through the water like a speedboat, powering forward to where they stood. Mariana's hand gripped Owen's arm on instinct, and he wrapped his frozen fingers around her elbow in response. Rory stood between them and the water's edge, and everyone seemed to be collectively holding their breath. When the monster struck, it was sudden. A long, curved neck stretched out of the water, ending with a face that looked like something out of Jurassic Park. It was still too dark to make out the details, but Owen could see the thing's eyes without any effort. They were dark and fierce, glistening in the moonlight as they locked in on its prey. That was all the warning they got, and none of them were quick enough to turn and run. The head came down like a whip,
stretching its jaw open wide and latching onto Rory by the throat. A multitude of sharp, serrated teeth sank mercilessly into his flesh, ripping it apart and causing his blood to cascade down. He didn't even have time to scream. The monstrous creature surged upward, hoisting Rory's lifeless body high into the air. It gave him a hard shake, like a dog might do, and the couple could hear the unmistakable snap of his bones giving way. "Mariana, run!" Owen shouted as soon as his fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. Gripping her arm tightly, he yanked her forward, her mouth still agape with shock. And together, they tore through the dense underbrush, driven by sheer panic. Branches lashed against their faces, but their determination to flee drove them onward in the general direction of the road. By the time they were able to flag down a passing car, Mariana was hysterical. There was blood caked into her hair from several small cuts, and she couldn't seem to pull more than a few words together in order, just muttering words like monster and real. When they told their story to people in town, everyone rolled their eyes at the tale of some drunk American tourists who let themselves get carried away by their imaginations. Owen and Mariana were left scarred. Days after their terrifying encounter, Owen began to experience haunting dreams. In his sleep, something from the highlands called out to him, beckoning him towards the loch. Unable to resist the relentless pull, Owen and Mariana returned to Loch Ness later that week. They ventured back to the small highland village, hoping to find more information about the creature. Deep in the archives of a small library, they stumbled upon a weathered journal that belonged to one of Owen's ancestors from centuries ago. As they leafed through the pages, they discovered entries detailing encounters with the Loch Ness monster. The journal described gruesome rituals performed by Owen's ancestors, dark sacrifices to appease the ancient terror that lurked in the depths of the loch. Dread filled Owen's heart as he realized the truth. The creature was not a mere legend, but a malevolent guardian of the Highland secrets. Following the instructions from the journal, Owen and Mariana embarked on an expedition back to Loch Ness. Armed with their newfound knowledge and a growing sense of dread, they arrived at the loch's shore, determined to confront the creature and destroy it. The rituals described in the journal were gruesome. They involved chanting ancient guttural incantations that resonated with the very darkness of the loch. The night was filled with howling winds and rain, as if nature itself was protesting their presence. As they chanted, a deep, low growl echoed from the water. Suddenly, the Loch Ness monster emerged. It was different this time, more aggressive and relentless than ever before. The creature's enormous head, with eyes gleaming with malevolence, bore down on them. Terrified and unable to complete the rituals in time, Owen and Mariana watched in horror as the Loch Ness monster's gaping mouth stretched wide, exposing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The creature was filled with a vengeful fury as its eyes examined Owen and Mariana. Then, in a heart-wrenching final act of desperation, Owen forcibly pushed Mariana towards the oncoming creature. The monster's jaws snapped shut with incredible force, tearing her apart in a gruesome display of carnage. Her screams were silenced as she was devoured, her blood staining the dark waters. Owen, with a grim smile, could only watch as the Loch Ness monster returned to the depths, leaving him completely alone. Owen's sacrificial act, like those of his ancestors before him, was the price paid to appease the ancient terror that lurked in Loch Ness. His family had not only feared the Loch Ness monster, but had also worshipped it for centuries, offering its sacrifices to protect themselves and their land. And this time, centuries later, it was dear Mariana. Owen was left forever bound to the horrifying legend of the loch. Hiroki gasped for air as he struggled against the icy grip of the water, his arms flailing desperately to keep him afloat. The river, once a serene sanctuary, had become a battleground, threatening to pull him under with every passing second. His mind raced with confusion and fear. How had he ended up here, on the brink of drowning in the very waters he had played in since he was an infant? The village of Mizohashi had always been a tranquil place, nestled between the rolling hills and the meandering river that provided for its people. But in recent months, an unsettling change had swept over the community. Fishermen, the heart of the village's livelihood, began to vanish without a trace. Their boats found empty and adrift in the river's calm waters. With each disappearance, a ripple of fear spread among the villagers. The river, once full of fish, seemed to have fallen under a mysterious curse. The catches grew smaller, and soon a food shortage began to loom over the village. In hushed conversations, the adults spoke of the old legends, tales of a creature that dwelled in the river's depths. They whispered of its cunning nature, wondering if the creature from their childhood stories could be more than just a myth. As the situation grew more dire, a sense of desperation settled over the village. The elders called for caution, advising everyone to stay away from the river. But for Hiroki, a young boy with a curious spirit, the warnings only fueled his fascination. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Without the adults knowing, Hiroki found himself drawn to the river's edge, determined to uncover the truth behind the disappearances. One summer evening, as the sun's golden rays retreated behind the mountains, Hiroki found himself wandering along the riverbank. As he roamed further from the village, he stumbled upon a peculiar sight. A series of odd webbed footprints on the soft mud near the water's edge. Perhaps it was a frog's possible dinner for his family. Intrigued by his discovery, Hiroki felt a surge of excitement. The footprints led away from the river into the dense thicket of the forest. Driven by curiosity, he decided to follow them. The further Hiroki ventured into the forest, the more the light dimmed. A sense of unease began to creep over him, but his determination pushed him forward. Suddenly, a strange gurgling sound echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down Hiroki's spine. It was unlike anything he had ever heard. He paused, listening intently, trying to discern the direction of the sound. It seemed to be coming from a clearing just ahead. As Hiroki ventured deeper into the forest, he stumbled upon a clearing that sent a chill down his spine. There, scattered among the trees, were the remains of the missing fishermen, their bodies half-eaten and left to rot. To Hiroki's horror, he noticed that their organs were gruesomely extracted. He remembered that a creature known as a kappa was known for its appetite for the shirikodama. The sight was horrifying, and Hiroki felt a surge of anger and sadness. He knew he had to act, but as soon as he turned to leave the clearing, a strange sound stopped him in his tracks. There, in the dim light filtering through the leaves, he saw it. A creature straight out of the legends he had dismissed. It was the kappa. It was small, no taller than a child, with green scaly skin and a shell resembling that of a turtle. Its most striking feature was the water-filled dish-like depression atop its head, shimmering in the fading light. But instead of the menacing presence Hiroki expected, the creature seemed almost comical, as it let out a series of loud, embarrassing sounds. The kappa passed gas, each time with a mischievous giggle. It was a bizarre sight, one that momentarily lightened the heavy atmosphere. The creature's eyes, glowing with an eerie luminescence, were fixed on Hiroki, who stood frozen in place. The kappa, noticing Hiroki's hesitation, let out a series of mocking gurgles. As if amused by his fear, it began to dance around him in a circle, its movements graceful yet unnerving. Hiroki realized that the kappa was toying with him, using its cunning nature to intimidate and confuse him. Determined not to fall for its tricks, Hiroki tried to keep his focus. But as he reached a clearing, the ground suddenly gave way beneath him, and he found himself sliding down a steep embankment toward the river. The kappa followed, its sinister grin widening as it watched Hiroki struggle to regain his footing. With a powerful leap, the kappa descended upon Hiroki, its claws extended and its eyes burning with malice. Hiroki barely managed to roll out of the way, feeling the rush of air as the creature's claws swiped at the space where he had just been. The kappa's laughter echoed through the air, a clear sign of its enjoyment in the chase. Hiroki's heart raced as he stood at the water's edge. He had nowhere to go. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped his ankle, pulling him with terrifying force into the water. He gasped, water filling his lungs as he was dragged deeper into the river's embrace. Panic set in as he struggled, his arms flailing in an attempt to break free. Just when he thought he could hold his breath no longer, he felt himself being pulled even deeper, down to where the light couldn't reach. In the murky darkness, he came face to face with the kappa, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. It stared at him with curiosity, as if studying its prey. Hiroki could feel the cold, calculating gaze of the kappa, sizing him up for its next move. Suddenly, the creature lunged forward, its webbed hands reaching out to grasp Hiroki. Hiroki dodged to the side, avoiding the kappa's attack. He knew he couldn't outrun the creature in its element, but he also knew he couldn't let himself be paralyzed by fear. With a surge of adrenaline, he fought back, throwing punches and kicks in a desperate attempt to fend off the kappa. The creature was quick, countering Hiroki's moves with swift, precise strikes of its own. It was clear that the kappa was not only strong, but also skilled in martial arts. Its movements fluid and deadly, but in a burst of desperation, Hiroki reached out and managed to grab a hold of the kappa's sara, the water-filled dish on its head and the source of its power. He could feel the creature's strength decreasing as he tipped the sara, spilling some of its contents. The kappa let out a ghastly screech. Seizing the moment, Hiroki broke free from the creature's grasp and kicked towards the surface with all his might. He emerged, gasping for air. It felt like a sweet embrace after the suffocating depths of the water. Exhausted and trembling, Hiroki dragged himself onto the riverbank, collapsing onto the damp earth. But his respite was short-lived. The water's surface rippled ominously, and the kappa re-emerged, its eyes burning with an intensified fury. Scrambling to his feet, Hiroki searched desperately for a weapon. Anything he could use to defend himself. His hand brushed against a sharp, jagged rock, and he grasped it tightly, turning to face the advancing kappa. The creature attacked again. This time, Hiroki was ready. He thrust the rock forward with all his might, catching the kappa off guard and striking it in the chest. The kappa let out a howl of pain, its grip faltering. Seizing the opportunity, Hiroki pushed the kappa back with all his strength, sending it tumbling into the shallow waters of the river, and the kappa struggled. The creature thrashed wildly, but Hiroki didn't relent. He knew this was his only chance to escape. With one final desperate effort, Hiroki delivered a powerful kick to the kappa, knocking the rest of the water from its sara. The kappa's eyes dimmed as it lay defeated in the water. Panting heavily, Hiroki staggered back, his heart racing with a mix of fear and triumph. He had faced the dreaded kappa and survived, but as he looked down at the defeated creature, a chill ran down his spine. The legends were real, and he knew that the world was filled with terrors beyond his wildest imagination. Hiroki vowed to never underestimate the stories of the old again. As Emily took one last bite of her birthday cake, she glanced at the clock and realized how late it was. A wave of panic washed over her as she remembered that her mother was going to be in town early in the morning. She quickly stood up, thanking her friends for the wonderful birthday surprise they had thrown for her. She called out for Max, her loyal companion, who had been patiently waiting for her. Her friends, concerned for her safety, suggested she stay the night. However, Emily knew that if she stayed, she'd likely oversleep and miss her mother's arrival. All right. But remember, if you hear something, no, you didn't. Her friends remarked as they said their goodbyes. Those were the exact words she heard all her life growing up in the Appalachian Mountains. The party's warmth and laughter faded into the background as Emily and Max set off through the dense forest. A sense of unease began to creep over Emily as the forest seemed more alive. Max, too, seemed on edge. His ears perked up, and his pace quickened. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the moonlight ahead. A woman standing in the path. "Emily, is that you?" "It's so cold out here," the woman called out, sounding eerily like her mother. Max growled. As Emily drew closer, she realized with horror that something was terribly wrong. The figure's eyes were too bright, too unnatural, and there was an unsettling stiffness in her movements. A sense of dread washed over Emily as she remembered the old tales of skinwalkers, beings that could mimic the voices and appearances of loved ones to lure their victims. As Emily and Max sprinted toward the cabin, the skinwalker's voice grew louder and more distorted, a chilling blend of her mother's voice and a sinister, otherworldly tone. Max started barking. Emily glanced back and saw a horrifying sight. The figure of her mother, now clearly not human, with glowing eyes and a twisted, snarling expression. The skinwalker moved towards them with a speed that seemed impossible for a human. Max barked again and leaped toward the creature, ready to defend Emily at all costs and let her go ahead of him. The skinwalker, however, seemed prepared for this, quickly dodging Max's attack with a swift, fluid motion. As Emily reached the cabin, she could hear the sounds of Max's growls and the skinwalker's eerie, mocking laughter behind her. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking with fear, and finally managed to unlock the door. With one last desperate look back, she saw Max holding his ground, facing off against the skinwalker. Emily rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and quickly formed a protective line of salt at the threshold. Emily whispered a prayer for her loyal companion, hoping that the protective measures would be enough. She rushed to secure every window and entrance, her hands trembling with each lock she fastened. Outside, the howls of the skinwalker grew more desperate. Max's barks were relentless. Emily peered through a crack in the curtains, her breath catching in her throat at the sight before her. The skinwalker, in its grotesque imitation of her mother, paced back and forth, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. It seemed to be searching for a way in, its form shifting and twitching unnaturally. Suddenly, it stopped and locked eyes with Emily, its gaze piercing through the darkness. "Emily, my dear, why won't you let me in? It's so cold out here," the skinwalker pleaded in a voice that eerily resembled her mother's. "I've come all this way for your birthday, and you leave me out in the dark?" The creature then turned its attention back to Max, who stood his ground bravely. In a swift motion, the skinwalker lunged at Max, causing Emily's heart to skip a beat. But Max, with his quick reflexes, dodged the attack and made a break for the cabin door. Emily quickly opened it just enough for him to slip through before slamming it shut again. With Max safely inside, the skinwalker's voice grew more insistent. "Emily, sweetheart, please open the door. I want to make sure you're safe."
But Emily knew better than to fall for the Skinwalker's deceitful words. The Skinwalker, now furious at being rejected, began to throw itself against the door with terrifying force. As the hours dragged on, the Skinwalker's attacks became more frenzied, its howls echoing through the forest like the cries of a tormented soul. Emily just hugged Max tight and listened to music. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break through the darkness, the howls outside started to fade. The Skinwalker, defeated by the coming daylight, let out one final enraged cry before retreating into the depths of the forest. Emily collapsed to the floor, exhaustion and relief washing over her as she hugged Max. Shortly after the terrifying encounter, Emily called her mother, only to learn that her flight had been delayed. Throughout the day, Emily and Max stayed close, each providing comfort to the other as they tried to shake off the remnants of fear. And as night fell, Emily turned on every lamp in the cabin. She double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, the salt line still intact from the night before. The hours ticked by, and Emily's anxiety grew with each passing minute. Finally, a knock came at the door. Emily's heart leaped into her throat. Peering through the window, she saw her mother standing on the porch, her luggage in hand. Rushing to the door, Emily threw it open and embraced her, tears of relief streaming down her face. But as she pulled away, Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was a flicker of something in her mother's eyes that didn't quite belong there. "Are you okay, honey?" the figure said in her mother's voice, but something was off. A cold realization washed over Emily. She hadn't hugged her mother. She had embraced the Skinwalker. Panic surged through her as she pushed the creature away and slammed the door shut. She fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the Skinwalker let out a loud, chilling laugh. "Won't you let me in to celebrate your birthday?" Emily backed away from the door. Suddenly, she heard another knock, softer this time, coming from the back door. Peering through the window, she saw her mother standing there, confusion and fear on her face as Emily just stared. "Emily, what's going on? Why won't you let me in?" her mother asked. The Skinwalker, sensing its opportunity, began to mimic her mother's pleas. Emily's mind raced as she tried to distinguish between the two voices. In a moment of clarity, she remembered a secret her grandmother had once shared. A special knock, a family code that only they knew. Pressing her face close to the door, she called out, "Mom, do the knock, do the knock!" After a tense moment, she heard it, the familiar rhythm of the secret knock. Relief flooded through her as she quickly opened the door and pulled her mother inside, locking the door behind them. Together they watched as the Skinwalker shifted and changed in the moonlight. Emily and her mother held each other close, as Max growled softly. In a desperate bid for safety, Emily's mother remembered an old family legend about a talisman hidden in the cabin, said to possess the power to repel evil. With no time to lose, Emily and her mother searched frantically, rummaging through the old boxes. Finally, in a dusty old chest, Emily's fingers closed around a small, intricately carved amulet. As soon as she touched it, a warm, pulsing energy coursed through her body. Outside, the Skinwalker sensed the presence of the talisman, and its howls grew even more frenzied. Emily approached the door, holding the amulet out in front of her. With a deep breath, she flung the door open. The Skinwalker recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. Emily stepped forward, the amulet glowing brightly in her hand, casting a protective light around her and her home. "Leave this place and never return," she commanded, her voice steady and filled with an authority she didn't know she possessed. The Skinwalker let out one final ear-splitting howl before disappearing into the forest. Emily and her mother embraced as dawn broke. Emily turned to her mother smiling. She was grateful for the gift of another day. She knew that no matter what shadows lurked in the corners of the world, she had the strength to face them as long as she had her mother by her side. In the bustling heart of Tokyo, where the vibrant art scene thrived, two struggling art students faced an unnerving lull in their careers. Akio, the photographer, and Mio, the makeup artist, had not received any gigs for a while. But one evening, as they discussed their dwindling opportunities in a cramped, dimly lit coffee shop, Akio received an intriguing email. A potential client sought his services for a private photo shoot. She offered a generous sum, enough to cover their expenses for the month. Eager for any opportunity, they agreed to meet her at an old studio in the outskirts of the city. The studio, an expansive space that had seen better days, echoed with their footsteps as they entered. Waiting in the dimly lit confines was their client, a tall figure draped in a sleek dark coat. Her face was obscured by a mask. "Thank you for coming," she greeted them. As they began setting up, Akio glanced at her curiously. "We're here to make you look your best. Whenever you're ready, you can remove the mask." She hesitated. "For now, I'd prefer to keep it on." The shoot started with the woman posing elegantly, yet always with her face hidden. Akio and Mio exchanged puzzled looks, but focused on capturing her mysterious allure. As they adjusted the lights and angles, the woman's aura of sadness and grace became increasingly palpable. Mio, unable to contain her curiosity, finally broke the silence. "May I ask why you choose to keep covered? It's quite unusual for a photo shoot." The woman paused, her eyes meeting Mio's in the mirror. She didn't respond. As the night wore on, a tension built within the room. Finally, during a brief pause, the woman turned to them, her hands trembling slightly as they reached for her mask. "You have been very kind. Perhaps it's time. Tell me, do you think I'm pretty?" The question hung heavy in the air, driven by a mixture of professionalism and genuine concern. Akio responded warmly. "Yes, of course." Mio murmured her agreement, cautious but encouraging. With a slow, almost ceremonial motion, the woman removed her mask, revealing her face. The sight was shocking. Her mouth was grotesquely slit from ear to ear. Mio gasped, stepping back instinctively, shaking her head. The woman's eyes filled with a profound sadness, then flickered with a darker emotion. Swiftly, she moved towards Mio, her demeanor shifting frighteningly. There was a flash of silver, a scream, and then silence fell like a cloak. Mio laid on the ground, clutching her face as blood gushed out of her. No makeup can fix that," the woman whispered cruelly. She then turned to Akio. "And you? Do you still find me pretty?" Akio, his mind racing with terror and pity, nodded slowly. "I think you need help. Let me help you." But with a shake of her head and a mournful smile, she stepped back into the shadows, her figure blending into the darkness of the studio. "It's too late," she murmured. In the aftermath, as emergency services filled the once quiet studio, Akio wrestled with the evening's surreal horrors. As he shared the events with the authorities, his thoughts lingered on the pain and tragedy behind the mask. One of the cops was familiar with the woman and explained. Kuchisakeona, which translates to slit-mouthed woman, is a well-known figure in Japanese folklore. According to the legend, she is a malicious spirit or ghost of a woman who was mutilated and her mouth was slit from ear to ear. She wears a mask to cover her disfigured face. Kuchisakeona approaches her victims and asks them a chilling question. "Am I pretty?" If the person answers no, she kills them with a pair of scissors she carries. If the answer is yes, she removes her mask to reveal her horrifying mutilation, then asks again. If the person reacts with fright or changes their answer, she kills them. If they don't, she might cut their mouths to resemble hers. After the horrific incident at the studio, Akio couldn't escape the dark allure of Kuchisakeona. Her presence escalated into a terror that stalked him relentlessly. He would see her reflection fleeting across windows and mirrors, her horrific smile briefly catching the light before vanishing. Each encounter left him chilled to the bone. Her whispered question, "Do you still think I'm pretty?" echoing in his ears long after she disappeared. His apartment, once a sanctuary, became a prison of paranoia. At night, he could hear the soft, dragging steps of someone pacing back and forth outside his door. Some nights the handle would turn slowly, quietly, testing whether it was locked. But Akio felt an inexplicable pull to understand her, to delve deeper into the legend that now consumed his life. He immersed himself in folklore, discovering tales of Kuchisake Ona's origins. A woman mutilated and cast aside, her spirit twisted by betrayal and sorrow. As his empathy for her grew, so did his fear. One stormy night, as Akio developed photos in his dark room, the door creaked open and there she stood, her figure obscured by the darkness, only her slit mouth visible, grinning grotesquely. "Do you still think I'm pretty?" she asked, her voice a deathly whisper that sent shivers down his spine. Frozen with fear, Akio couldn't respond. She stepped closer, the stench of decay filling the room. "Answer me," she hissed, her face inches from his. "Yes," Akio stammered, his voice barely audible. "Yes, you are." She looked at him with cruel satisfaction, and suddenly she vanished. That night, Akio couldn't sleep. He sat awake, clutching a camera, his only defense against the unknown. The next few days, the hauntings grew more intense, each encounter more terrifying than the last. She began to appear not just in solitudes, but in public places. Always watching, always waiting. Driven to the brink, Akio decided to confront her, to end this torment. He set up his camera in the very studio where they first met, the place where the veil between their worlds had thinned. As the clock struck midnight, she appeared, her presence filling the room with cold dread. "Why me?" Akio demanded, his voice echoing the empty studio. "Because you saw the real me, and you didn't turn away," Kuchisake Onna replied. Akio raised his camera, his hands trembling. "Let me capture you again." She paused, considering his offer. Slowly she nodded, and as he snapped photos, her figure began to fade, her outline blurring with each flash until she disappeared entirely. Akio left the studio that night, his heart heavy. He had captured her essence, perhaps freeing her spirit, or at least calming it. In the months following his terrifying encounters with Kuchisake Onna, Akio poured his fear and fascination into his photography, capturing the haunting essence of the spectral figure who tormented him. He decided to host a private gallery showing, titled The Haunted Lens, inviting art critics, paranormal researchers, and enthusiasts of the supernatural. The gallery was filled with stark, chilling photographs of Kuchisake Onna, each one more gripping than the last, showing her figure and gruesomely slit mouth. Whispers of awe and horror mingled in the dimly lit room. The atmosphere was tense. Midway through the evening, the temperature dropped sharply, and a heavy silence fell over the crowd. Kuchisake Onna materialized before her images, her presence causing a stir of fear and fascination. Her eyes darted across the room, taking in the crowd and the photographs of herself. Seeing herself through the eyes of others, her anger ignited. A deep, unsettling scream escaped her, chilling the room further. She moved swiftly, her form almost a blur as she approached a young woman who had been admiring the grotesque beauty of the images. The crowd froze, watching in horror as Kuchisake Onna pulled out her scissors. "Am I pretty?" she hissed, her voice a terrifying whisper that echoed through the gallery. The woman, caught in a paralyzing fear, couldn't respond. Before Kuchisake Onna could strike, Akio intervened. He stepped between them, his heart pounding but his voice surprisingly calm. "She means yes. You are beautiful," he quickly said, addressing Kuchisake Onna while keeping his eyes on her menacing gaze. "Everyone here understands you more than you know." Kuchisake Onna paused, her hands still raised, her expression one of confusion and anger. Akio continued, "Your story, your pain, it deserves to be seen and not feared." Slowly, the tension in her posture lessened. Her hand lowered, and the supernatural chill began to dissipate. The room exhaled in relief as Kuchisake Onna turned her gaze back to the photographs, then to the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces of those who now looked back at her, not just with fear, but with understanding. Kuchisake Onna looked at Akio, a nod of acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude, before she faded away, her form dissolving into the air like mist. The aftermath of that night was profound. Akio's exhibit was talked about for weeks, for being a sensational display of supernatural art. and as an encounter that bridged the gap between the living and the dead. His career took off spectacularly, with galleries eager to host his work. Akio continued his work, forever changed by the ghostly muse who had both haunted his dreams and made them come true. Jane, a recent college grad, had moved into an old townhouse. It had a worn, eerie feel with creaky floors and dim lighting, but it was affordable and conveniently located. Despite the unease, she was excited about her new life. One evening while cleaning, she stumbled upon a dusty old trunk. Inside, she found an antique porcelain doll. It was dressed in a once elegant dress, now faded and tattered. Its porcelain face was cracked. Attached to the doll was a note that read, "Mary." Jane had always been fascinated by antiques. She admired the doll despite its eerie appearance. She placed it on a shelf in the living room, thinking it added a touch of vintage charm to her new home. That evening, Jane invited a few friends over to celebrate her move. Her home, though old, was cozy, and her friends admired the doll, but also felt some discomfort. "That doll gives me the creeps," one of her friends remarked. "Where did you find it?" "In a bedroom," Jane replied. "I think it's charming, in a weird way." As the night wore on, the conversation shifted to other topics, and the doll was forgotten. But as Jane's friends left and the apartment grew quiet, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced at the doll, its eyes seemingly locked into hers. Unease gnawed at her, and she decided to text her friend Lisa, who had been disturbed by the doll. "The doll is seriously creeping me out," Jane wrote. "Same here," Lisa replied almost immediately. "You should get rid of it." Jane stared at the doll for a moment longer, then made up her mind. She picked it up, feeling its cold, cracked surface under her fingers. The feeling of being watched intensified. She carried the doll to the kitchen, grabbed a trash bag, and wrapped the doll tightly before taking it to the dumpster. She threw it in, hoping that would be the end of it. "There," Jane muttered to herself, "out of sight, out of mind." The unease began to fade, and she hoped that would be the end of it. Jane went to bed, trying to push thoughts of the doll out of her mind. She had barely fallen asleep when her phone rang. She checked the screen, an unknown number. Confused, she answered. "Hello?"
"It's Mary. I'm on the way."
A childlike voice whispered. Jane sat up, her heart pounding. She quickly hung up, trying to calm herself. It must have been a prank call. But as she laid back down, the phone rang again.
"It's Mary. I'm closer now,"
the voice said, sending chills down her spine. Jane's hands trembled as she ended the call. She got up and checked all the locks, drawing the curtains tight. At midnight, the phone rang once more. Jane hesitated before answering, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello?"
"I'm right outside,"
Mary said. Jane immediately crept to the door and peered through the peephole, but no one was there. She backed away, her mind racing with fear. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on the door. Jane screamed, grabbing a kitchen knife as she backed into a corner. The knocking stopped abruptly, replaced by silence. Her phone buzzed with a text message from the same unknown number.
"Let me in."
Tears streamed down Jane's face as she typed back, "Who are you? What do you want?" The response was immediate.
"You abandoned me. Now you must pay."
The lights flickered and the temperature in the room plummeted. Jane could see her breath as she looked around, clutching the knife tighter. Then she saw it. The doll stood in the distance, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. It moved slowly, its limbs jerking unnaturally as it approached her. Jane backed away, but the doll's gaze held her in place.
"Why did you leave me?"
the doll said without moving its mouth. "I'm sorry," Jane sobbed. "Leave me alone." The doll's face cracked further, a sinister smile spreading across its face.
"Too late."
With a sudden burst of speed, the doll attacked. Jane swung the knife, but it passed through the doll as if it were made of smoke. The doll's tiny hands reached her, grabbing her wrists with surprising strength. She screamed as the room around her seemed to dissolve. When Jane opened her eyes, she was no longer home. She found herself in a dark, endless forest, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Shadows danced around her. Jane looked down and saw her wrists were bleeding from where the doll had gripped her.
Welcome to my world.
Mary's voice echoed around her.
You will stay here forever.
Jane's breath quickened as she realized she was not alone. The forest was filled with grotesque, mutilated figures, their eyes glowing with a haunting light. They began to slowly move towards her. Jane remembered the knife and gripped it tightly, slashing at the figures as they drew near. Her strikes went through them, but it slowed their advance. Desperate, she ran through the forest, the grotesque figures trailing behind her. The forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, and Jane's legs burnt from the exertion. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old house. With no other options, Jane sprinted towards the house, hoping to find refuge. As she reached the door, she glanced back. The figures were closing in, their forms becoming more defined, revealing their gruesome injuries and hollow eyes. Jane threw herself inside and slammed the door shut, bolting it with trembling hands. She backed away, clutching the knife, her eyes scanning the dimly lit interior. The house was filled with decayed furniture, cobwebs hanging from every corner. The air was thick with the smell of rot. She noticed a staircase leading down to a basement. With no other place to hide, she cautiously descended the creaking steps. The basement was dark and damp. In the center of the room was a large mirror, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. Jane approached the mirror, her reflection barely visible in the dim light. She wiped the dust away, revealing the mirror's polished surface. As she stared into the mirror, the reflection began to change. The image of the doll appeared behind her. Jane spun around, but the room was empty. Suddenly, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She screamed and swung the knife, but there was nothing there. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and Jane felt herself being pulled towards it. She was pulled through the mirror, emerging into a twisted version of her home, where everything was dark and decayed. Mary appeared before her, no longer a doll, but a ghost.
You abandoned me. You will stay here forever.
Jane realized she had to play along if she wanted to survive. "I'm sorry, Mary," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't mean to abandon you. Let's play together." Mary's eyes gleamed with a sinister joy.
You want to play with me?
"Yes," Jane replied, her mind racing for a plan. Mary grinned, her twisted face contorting in a horrifying expression.
Let's play hide and seek. If you can find me, I'll let you go. But if I find you, you'll stay here forever.
Jane nodded, trying to mask her fear. Mary vanished, leaving Jane alone. Jane knew she had to find a way to destroy Mary. She remembered the stories of malevolent spirits being bound to objects. The doll had to be the key. She frantically searched the apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. She found the doll, hidden in the shadows of the living room. She grabbed it, feeling a surge of malevolent energy. Mary screamed in rage as Jane held the doll. Mary shrieked, lunging at Jane. Jane swung the knife at Mary, distracting her long enough to run to the kitchen. She grabbed a lighter from the drawer, igniting it with shaking hands. Mary attacked her again, but Jane was ready. She set the doll on fire, the flames quickly engulfing it. A piercing scream filled the air as the house shook, the walls cracking and crumbling. Mary's form flickered and distorted as she cried in agony.
No, what have you done?
"I've set you free," Jane said, watching as Mary's form dissolved into the flames. The room around her began to collapse, the twisted reality breaking apart. Jane felt herself being pulled back into the real world. She woke up on the floor of her home, the charred remains of the doll in front of her. The air was clear, the oppressive darkness gone. Jane knew she had to leave for good. She packed her belongings and left. determined to never return. However, as she reached the end of the street, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and saw an unknown number. Dread filled her as she answered the call.
It's Mary. I'm back.
The childlike voice whispered, sending a chill down her spine. Jane dropped the phone, her heart pounding with fear. The nightmare was far from over. The dense forest surrounding the remote campsite in the Sierra Madre Mountains of the Philippines was a place of legends. The De La Cruz family, Michael, Sarah, and their children, Jack, Emily, and Lily, had decided to try to spend the weekend reconnecting with nature. But Lily's piercing cries filled the air, adding to the already high tension. From the moment they arrived, things started to go wrong. The mosquitoes were relentless, the air was thick with humidity, and Lily had been crying almost non-stop since they pitched their tent. Michael's patience was wearing thin. "I told you this wasn't a good idea," Sarah muttered, bouncing Lily on her hip in an attempt to calm her down. Jack and Emily sat by the campfire. "This sucks," Jack said, poking at the fire with a stick. Emily nodded in agreement, looking mournfully at the untouched marshmallows. Michael ran a hand through his hair. "I get it, Sarah, but let's try to make the best of it. It'll be better tomorrow." Just as he finished speaking, Lily's cries abruptly stopped. An eerie silence fell over the campsite, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Sarah looked down at Lily, who had finally fallen asleep in her arms. "Finally," she sighed, relief washing over her. But the relief was short-lived. From somewhere deep in the forest came the unmistakable sound of a baby crying. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the trees. Sarah's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" Michael was confused. "Probably just an animal." "No, that's a baby. We have to check it out. What if a baby is lost out there?" Michael hesitated, but then nodded. "All right. Stay here with the kids. I'll go take a look." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not staying here while you go off into the dark. Jack, Emily, stay in the tent and look after Lily. We'll be back soon." Michael grabbed a flashlight and a hunting knife, while Sarah took a blanket. They left Jack and Emily in the safety of the tent with Lily, warning them to stay put until they returned. The forest was a labyrinth of twisted branches and undergrowth. The cries seemed to come from all directions, disorienting them. As they ventured deeper, the temperature seemed to drop, and a thick fog began to roll in, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center lay a bundle of tattered cloth. The crying had stopped, replaced by silence. Sarah approached the bundle cautiously. She pulled back the cloth to reveal a hideous creature with a twisted, demonic face and razor-sharp teeth. It let out a blood-curdling screech, leaping at Sarah with unnatural speed. Michael lunged forward, slashing at the creature with his knife. The blade sank into its flesh, but it barely flinched. It clawed at Michael, tearing through his jacket and flesh, blood spraying in all directions. Michael's screams of pain echoed through the forest, mingling with the creature's shrieks. Michael told Sarah to run, and tried to hold his ground against the demon. They turned and ran, the forest seeming to close in around them. The cries of the creature echoed through the trees. When they finally reached the tent, they found it ripped open and empty. Panic surged through them. Sarah called out for her kids. A rustling sound came from the bushes nearby. Michael turned on his flashlight, revealing Jack and Emily huddled together, their faces pale with terror. But Lily was missing.
"Something was here. It tried to get us, and then Lily just vanished."
Michael hugged his children tight. "We need to find her." As they prepared to search the forest again, they heard Lily's cries from deeper in the woods. Without hesitation, they ran towards the sound, their hearts pounding with fear and desperation. The cries led them further and further away from the campsite. Finally, they reached another clearing. There, on the ground, lay a bundle of tattered cloth. Sarah approached the bundle cautiously. She pulled back the cloth to reveal the hideous twisted face of the baby. It let out a blood-curdling screech and lunged at her. Sarah grabbed a large branch and swung it at the creature with all her strength, knocking it back momentarily. Suddenly, they heard a cry behind them. They turned and saw Lily, abandoned and alone, crying weakly. Sarah's heart leaped as she cried, rushing toward her daughter. Michael kept his eyes on the creature, which was already recovering. "Get Lily and get to the car," he said, trying to buy them some time. Sarah scooped up Lily, and with Jack and Emily close behind, they raced to the car. Michael was right behind them, slashing at the air to keep the creature at bay. They reached the car and piled in, Sarah fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life just as the creature slammed into the side of the car, its claws scratching deep into the metal. Sarah floored the accelerator, the tires kicking up dirt as they sped away. The creature tried to keep up. They could hear its screams fading into the distance as they finally escaped the forest. Breathing heavily, Sarah glanced at Michael. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face pale. "Are you okay?" she asked. Michael nodded weakly. Relieved and exhausted, they drove home. But as the days turned into weeks, Lily began to behave more strangely. Her eyes, once bright and innocent, now glowed with an unsettling light. She stopped crying and stared at them with an intensity that was unnerving. At night, she would babble in a language none of them understood. Her skin grew cold, and her behavior became increasingly erratic. One afternoon, while Michael was watching her, Lily's demeanor changed. Her eyes locked onto Michael's with a malevolent glare. Without warning, she sank her tiny teeth into his hand. Michael yelped in pain and tried to pull away, but Lily's grip was unnaturally strong. Blood trickled from the bite wound as she released him, her lips curling into a sinister smile. Then she laughed, a chilling, guttural sound that sent shivers down Michael's spine. He stared at his daughter, realizing that whatever was happening to her was getting worse. Desperate, the family sought help from local shamans and healers. They traveled from village to village, consulting with anyone who might offer a solution. Each healer they visited offered a different remedy, but none seemed to work. They tried herbs, rituals, and prayers, but Lily's condition only worsened. She grew more distant, her eyes glowing brighter, her behavior more unpredictable. The family was on the brink of despair when they heard about an elder in a remote village known for his knowledge of ancient curses. The elder's hut was surrounded by talismans and protective charms. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs. The elder listened to their story with great concern. He examined Lily, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "The Tianak has cursed your daughter," his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "It is slowly transforming her into one of its own. This is no ordinary curse. It is a bond forged in darkness and malice. The only way to save her is to perform an ancient ritual deep in the forest where the curse originated." He handed them a talisman for protection, its surface covered in intricate symbols. "You must return to the heart of the forest," he continued. "There you will find an altar. Perform the ritual at midnight and be prepared for the Tianak's fury. It will do everything in its power to stop you." With heavy hearts, they prepared for another journey into the heart of the darkness, determined to save Lily from the fate that awaited her. And so, the Dela Cruz family ventured back into the forest, determined to save their daughter from a fate worse than death. The forest seemed even more menacing than before, its shadows deeper and its silence more oppressive, as they prepared themselves for the battle to come. In a secluded village on the outskirts of Okinawa, there stood an old orphanage known to the locals as a place of sorrow and mystery. Its walls were adorned with the echoes of children long gone, and its grounds held the whispers of legends too dark to be spoken aloud. The children who lived there were blissfully unaware of the orphanage's dark past, but all of that was about to change. The night was still. Inside the orphanage, the children were fast asleep, except for a young girl named Yui. Yui was a curious and brave child, always the first to explore and the last to retreat. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake off an uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. Yui's unease was accompanied by a strange noise that seemed to come from the forest bordering the orphanage grounds. It was faint at first, almost like a distant echo, but it grew louder and more insistent. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and listened intently. Unable to ignore the sound any longer, Yui decided to investigate. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed outside. The sight that met her eyes made her blood run cold. A tall white figure stood at the edge of a forest, its long dark hair cascading down its back. The figure seemed to be watching the orphanage, swaying gently as it let out the haunting sound. It was now a rhythmic chant, hypnotic and eerie. Yui felt a chill run down her spine as she locked eyes with the woman. The woman's lips curved into a sinister smile, revealing sharp, pointed teeth. Yui took a step back, her instinct screaming at her to run, but her feet seemed rooted to the ground. "Yui!" The shout snapped her out of her trance. It was Hiroshi, one of the older boys from the orphanage. He had followed her outside, worried about her safety. The tall woman turned her gaze to Hiroshi, and the air grew even colder. "Run!" Hiroshi yelled, grabbing her hand and pulling her away from the figure. The woman let out a shrill, bone-chilling scream and began to move towards them, her long limbs stretching unnaturally. They ran as fast as they could, the woman's screams echoing in their ears. They burst through the back door of the orphanage and slammed it shut behind them. The other children had woken up by now, their faces pale with fear as they huddled together in the common room. The windows shattered, and a gust of icy wind swept through the room. The tall figure loomed in the broken window, her eyes glowing with malevolent intent. She reached out a long clawed hand and in a blur of motion grabbed one of the children, a boy named Kenji who was standing closest to the window. The children screamed in terror as the woman lifted Kenji effortlessly, her jaw opening wide to reveal rows of sharp, glistening teeth. Kenji's screams were abruptly cut off as the spirit bit down, blood splattering across the room. The headmistress quickly took charge. She was a stern but kind woman, well versed in the local legends and protective rituals. She gathered the children around her and began to explain. "That was Hachishaku-sama," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "An ancient spirit that preys on children. We must protect ourselves." She handed each child a protective talisman and instructed them to stay inside, no matter what they heard or saw. "When I was a young girl, I too encountered Hachishaku-sama. She devoured my best friend before my eyes, and I was lucky to survive. Since then, I've dedicated my life to protecting children." She then drew a circle of salt around the common room and placed candles at each corner, chanting prayers to ward off the spirit. Hachishaku-sama let out another ear-piercing scream, but was unable to penetrate the protective barrier. The candles flickered and then flared brightly, casting a blinding light that forced the spirit to retreat. The headmistress lowered her arms, exhausted but triumphant. "She is gone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The children slowly began to relax, though the fear still lingered in their eyes. The children, exhausted and traumatized, finally settled down to sleep, clutching their protective talismans tightly. In the middle of the night, Yui awoke with a startle. She could feel the presence in the room, something cold and malevolent. Her eyes darted around the dark room, and her heart raced as she heard a faint, familiar sound. She glanced around and saw Hiroshi, his eyes wide open and filled with terror, staring at the far corner of the room. There, standing in the shadows, was Hachishaku-sama. Her tall white figure loomed over the sleeping children, her eyes glowing with a sinister light. Yui tried to scream, but no sound came out. She watched in horror as Hachishaku-sama reached out and grabbed Hiroshi by the ankle, pulling him towards her. The other children woke up, their screams filling the room as they saw the horrifying scene unfold. The headmistress rushed into the common room, her face pale with fear and determination. She began chanting again, her voice rising in desperation. With all her strength, she threw a handful of salt at Hachishaku-sama, causing the spirit to recoil and hiss in anger. The candles flared to life once more, casting a blinding light. Hachishaku-sama released Hiroshi, who collapsed to the floor, his leg mangled and bleeding profusely. The spirit let out one final bone-chilling scream before disappearing into the shadows. The headmistress rushed to Hiroshi's side, applying pressure to his wound. "You're safe now," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The children gathered around, their faces pale with fear and relief. Despite the horror they had witnessed, they were grateful that Hiroshi was alive, though his leg was severely injured. Hours later, Hiroshi was resting in the infirmary. The other children had finally fallen asleep, still shaken by the night's events. The room was quiet, save for the soft breathing of sleeping children. Suddenly, Hiroshi's eyes snapped open, wide with terror. He let out a blood-curdling scream that jolted the other children awake. The headmistress rushed to his side, but before she could reach him, Hiroshi passed out again, his body limp and unresponsive. The children huddled together, fear gripping them once more. The headmistress tried to calm them, but her own heart was pounding with dread. As she turned to check on Hiroshi again, he suddenly sat up, his eyes dark and empty. He murmured, a sinister smile spreading across his face. The children screamed in unison, the sound echoing through the orphanage as the terrifying realization set in. Hachishaku-sama hadn't been banished after all. She had found a new vessel. The room plunged into chaos, the children crying out in fear and confusion. The headmistress stared in horror at Hiroshi, who continued to chant the eerie sound. Hiroshi's body convulsed violently, his limbs twisting at grotesque angles. His skin began to blister and crack, oozing dark blood. His eyes rolled back, and an unearthly wail escaped his face. The children screamed and backed away, but the doors and windows were sealed by an unseen force. The room filled with the sickening sound of bones snapping and flesh tearing as Hiroshi's transformation continued. With a final bone-chilling scream, Hiroshi's body began to grow taller, elongating grotesquely. He transformed into Hachishaku-sama, with eyes glowing with malevolent delight. She towered over the children, her long clawed fingers dripping with Hiroshi's blood. She chanted louder, her voice reverberating through the walls. The headmistress stepped forward, positioning herself between the children and the monster. The children scrambled behind her, their faces pale with fear. The nightmare was far from over. Victoria wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. As a crime scene photographer, she'd seen enough death to know most horror stories were just that, stories. When the call came to check out the abandoned church on Hollow Street, she didn't flinch. The locals had said it was just kids sneaking in to fool around. The fact that it was almost Halloween only fueled the town's superstitions. People like to say weird things happened around this time of year, but Victoria dismissed it. As she walked toward the old building, camera in hand, memories began to surface. She had sat in these pews as a child, her family faithfully attending services every Sunday, her hands folded in prayer. That was a lifetime ago. Victoria arrived just before dusk. The church loomed before her, its once grand exterior reduced to a decaying ruin. The wind picked up as she pushed the door open. Dust and debris everywhere as she stepped in. She turned on her flashlight and it flickered in the dark. Inside, the church was even worse than she had expected. Pews were overturned, and the floor was littered with shards of broken stained glass. As she approached the altar, something on the floor caught her eye. Strange symbols were written in what looked like dried blood. They were intricate, and at the center of the markings was a single name. She paused, staring at the name. It didn't ring a bell. Probably a prank, she thought. She shook off the unease and continued her exploration. As she walked away from the altar, the ground beneath her feet trembled, just slightly at first, but then the tremor grew stronger. She stumbled back as the altar split open with a loud crack. A cloud of dust filled the air, and Victoria coughed, raising her hand to her mouth. When the dust cleared, she saw it, an ancient book bound in leather, nestled within the cracked stone. She knelt down to inspect the book. The cover was worn, and it had the same strange symbol she had seen on the floor. Without thinking, she reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the leather, an icy chill shot through her body, paralyzing her for a moment. She pulled back, her breath catching in her throat. The temperature in the room had dropped. Something about the book felt wrong. Still, she opened it, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. Inside, the symbols were even more intricate, written in a language she didn't recognize. That's when the whispers began. At first, they were faint, barely audible, but they grew louder, filling the room. Victoria stood up quickly, her flashlight swinging through the church, but there was no one else there. The sound was coming from everywhere at once. Victoria's flashlight flickered again as she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. She froze, her breath quickening as she turned toward the far corner of the church. There, half hidden in the shadows, stood a figure that looked like a nun. It was tall, pale, its eyes hollow and wide, and its mouth sewn shut with thick black stitches. The figure didn't move, but its presence filled the room with a suffocating heaviness. The whispers grew louder, closing in on her from every direction. Victoria's pulse raced as panic gripped her. She turned and bolted toward the door, but when she grabbed the handle, it wouldn't move. She turned back toward the figure, and her heart dropped. It was closer now. Its hollow eyes stared directly at her, and its stitched mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. She stumbled back toward the altar. The flashlight flickered, casting wild shadows across the walls. As the whispers grew deafening, Victoria fumbled with her camera, her hands trembling. Before she could think, the camera slipped from her grasp and hit the stone floor with a sharp crack. Then, invisible hands wrapped around her throat. She gasped, clawing at her neck, but there was nothing there, just the crushing force squeezing the life from her. Her vision blurred as the pressure increased, and she struggled to breathe. Victoria's body jerked violently as an unseen force lifted her off her feet and slammed her into the ceiling. Pain exploded through her as her back and head hit the stone above. The next moment, she was hurled back down onto the cold floor. In her haze of pain and panic, Victoria remembered the ridiculous scenes from horror movies where characters slash their palms in desperation. It never made sense to her, but now, as her life slipped away, it seemed like the only option left. In a desperate act, Victoria grabbed a shard of broken stone and slashed her palm open. Blood dripped onto the symbols, and the church trembled violently. From the symbols, small black serpents began to emerge, their scales glistening as they moved toward her. They slithered toward her legs, coiling around her ankles and slowly tightening. Panic surged through her. Her blood mixed with the symbols on the floor, and the serpents seemed to grow more aggressive, their bodies cold and smooth against her skin. Her eyes caught the name Valak etched into the altar, and in her panic, the word slipped from her lips. She whispered, her voice barely audible. Desperate, her mind raced, and she found herself mumbling any prayer she could remember from her childhood. The moment she said the name, the serpents froze, their cold grip loosening around her. Slowly, they retreated back into the floor, disappearing as though pulled back into the symbols from which they came. The figure flickered and distorted as it struggled, but it was too late. With a final silent scream, the figure was dragged toward the altar and vanished into the darkness beneath the stone. The doors creaked open behind her. Victoria staggered to her feet. She stumbled out of the church and collapsed onto the cold ground outside, gasping for air. Days later, in the safety of her apartment, Victoria sat at her desk, trying to convince herself that what had happened in the church was nothing more than a series of nightmares strung together by exhaustion. She'd gone through her camera's memory card dozens of times, hoping to prove to herself that it had all been in her head. But each attempt left her empty-handed. Most of the photos were too dark or too blurry to decipher. Her apartment was eerily quiet, with only the hum of her computer cutting through the stillness. She clicked to the last image. The screen flickered for a moment, and then she saw it. The figure, standing in the shadows, its sewn mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, its hollow eyes staring directly at her as if it had always been watching. Her hand hovered over the mouse, frozen. She leaned closer, heart pounding as something else caught her eye. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was the name scratched into the darkness. Valak. The temperature in her apartment dropped sharply. A wave of nausea hit her as the air seemed to thicken, turning cold and oppressive. The shadows in the room flickered, shifting unnaturally as though they were alive. She quickly turned off her computer, but the screen flickered back on by itself, displaying the same image, now zoomed in on the figure's twisted grin. A soft, scratching sound came from behind her. Victoria's heart stopped. She slowly turned, her breath shallow, expecting to see nothing. But there, on her apartment wall, was the name. It was as if it was clawed by unseen hands. Her vision blurred as the whispers started again, louder than before, surrounding her from every direction. She stood up, backing away toward the door. The walls seemed to pulse with the sound of scratching, and her legs trembled. Suddenly, her phone lit up on the desk, a single text message appearing. It read, "You can't escape." The last thing Victoria witnessed was the room plunging into darkness, and in the shadows, the figure from the church appeared, grinning and ready to take her life.
It was a dream of mine to travel to Albuquerque for the annual Hot Air Balloon Festival. It's where Dad proposed to Mom many moons ago. Mom was finally ready to take us there, just us girls. She wanted to relive the adventure. We decided to rent an RV from the trip from LA to New Mexico. My mom and I took turns driving, and it wasn't too shabby. An AC, kitchen, comfortable beds, and a bathroom. It was the perfect road trip. As we approached Albuquerque, it was already almost midnight. I knew we had to be getting closer to the campgrounds. I used Google Maps and followed the directions, but the GPS was lagging, and we ended up lost. We should have timed it better. Venturing out after sundown wasn't a smart idea. After circling around a few times, we managed to come across a beat-up shack with its lights on and music playing.
Are you an idiot? Since when is stepping out of your vehicle in the middle of nowhere a good idea?
I know we're getting close to the RV park. I just need to know which road will take us there. Mom, will you come with me?
You are an idiot. Stop it, you two. We're here to enjoy each other's company.
You can stay here if you want, Anna. We're only asking for directions.
Fine, but bring the pepper spray and gun with you.
My mom followed me while Anna sat in the driver's seat and kept watch, pistol in hand. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Maybe they're asleep. After what felt like an eternity, we heard footsteps slowly approaching the door.
Who is it? You shouldn't be out here this late.
I'm sorry, ma'am. We're a little lost and need to know how to get to the nearest RV park.
Well, I'm not opening my door. It's not safe at these hours.
What do you mean?
You're not from around here, so listen closely. Drive left for about 2 miles until you reach an intersection. Then make a left for another mile. Then a right, and then an immediate left. You'll see the signs.
You got that? Yeah, typed it out on my notes app. Thank you, kind stranger.
And one more thing. If you hear any screams, if you see any animals, keep on driving. Don't stop. Don't look at it.
Okay.
A witch-like creature roams these parts. One that can shapeshift into any animal. Don't acknowledge it when you see it.
Have a good night.
And make sure you don't turn right at the intersection.
We got back in the RV and Mom read out the directions while I drove in the dark.
This is really dangerous. It's pitch black.
We have the moon and the stars. It'll be all right. Donna is an excellent driver and is really careful. My palms were sweating, thinking about what that woman told us. I made sure to keep my eyes focused ahead and drove slowly. Which way now?
Right turn after this intersection.
You know,
if we die out here...
No one is going to die. Stop being so negative. You're only making things worse.
Excuse me?
This is all your fault. You're the one who took a long time taking pictures of the Grand Canyon. Guess what? No one on Instagram gives a shit about where you've been. You little fart face.
Ooh, fart face, so badass.
Stop!
What was that?
Shh! I stopped the car and looked ahead, trying to figure out if I hit something. Can one of you look out the back window to see if I hit something?
Fine.
Anna walked to the back of the RV and looked out the window.
Drive! Now! Go, go, go!
I stepped on the pedal and sped away. Anna ran to Mom and started hyperventilating. She looked like she just saw a ghost and told me to keep driving. Luckily, after more circling around and a minor hiccup, we finally reached the RV park. I was happy to see other people finishing up their barbecues and cleaning up. I was tired and looking forward to bed. Just a few more hours until sunrise and the hot air balloon festival. Dad would have loved to be here. A tinge of sadness washed over me as I remembered his passing. Yet I dared not mention it to either of them, in fear of upsetting them. We were doing this in his memory and felt he would appreciate us remembering him this way. I got ready for bed and was going to take out the garbage.
Don't go out there.
What's up with you? Anna looked really pale. She explained what she saw earlier.
It was the scariest thing I've ever seen.
As soon as I looked out the window, I saw this man crouched down on the road. And in the blink of an eye,
The man was gone, and in his place was this beast on all fours chasing us. But it was as if it were half man, half beast, with wolf skin and a wolf head with glowing eyes and sharp claws. Is that why you screamed? What? I didn't scream. I could have sworn I heard her scream in the RV. We tried to comfort her, and Mom made her some hot chocolate. I debated whether or not I should step outside, but decided to just do it, since I had been putting it off for far too long. My main obligations during the trip were driving and garbage. I stepped outside and looked for the dumpster. I ran as fast as I could there and back. But when I was approaching the RV, I noticed scratches on the back of the vehicle and what looked like blood. I suddenly felt like I was being watched, but shrugged it off. As I was entering the RV, I saw something. From my peripheral vision, in the darkness, I saw an animal unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I quickly shut the door. What's wrong with you now? I saw it. We need to leave. I agree. What? But you haven't experienced the hot air balloons yet. But it's okay. If you don't feel safe, then it's best we leave. Anna and I looked at each other and felt guilty. Mom has been really depressed since Dad's passing. This trip was mainly for her. We decided that we'd leave right after the festival and headed to bed. We woke up before sunrise. That way we would be the first guests at the festival and find a place to park the RV. It was Mom's turn to drive, and I slept in a little more. That was until I immediately got out of bed. Mom was driving as fast as she could and screaming. Anna and I ran to the passenger seat. The creature. I looked away as soon as I saw it and yelled for them to do the same. But I'll never forget what I saw. In that split second, I got a good look at it. It looked really odd. It was as if a man had taken a wolf, skinned it, and wore its fur and head as clothing. And he had really, really long limbs, running on its hind legs at the same speed as the RV. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack when I heard it scratching on the side of the RV. Mom sped up and started praying as loud as she could. Anna was crying hysterically. I kept reminding her to breathe and to keep her eyes on me. I looked at it for a second and saw its bones crack and reform as it started running on all fours. Its body was all covered in fur now, and in about 3 seconds was now what appeared to be a wolf. And it miraculously ran off into the woods out of view. A few seconds later, we heard the police sirens and were pulled over for speeding. I never thought I'd be so relieved to be in trouble with the law. We explained what we saw, and the policeman had a serious look on his face. He decided to not give us a ticket and let us go with just a warning. To get out of the area as soon as possible and to not look back. I'm sorry, guys, but we're not going to the festival. Mom kept driving until we were out of Albuquerque, and she didn't stop. We should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. Maybe this could have all been avoided. As Lena and I made our way from I-287, we approached the Tappan Zee Bridge in Westchester, New York. The bridge crossed over from Nyack into Tarrytown. I kept our Jeep Cherokee to the leftmost lane to keep her view limited to the water some 100 feet below. Lena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Lena, it's okay. We're almost there. You know, we could have gone anywhere you wanted for Halloween. I hate bridges.
Not sure why they bother me so much, just know I hate them. She appeared to let the feeling of anxiety pass over her like a breeze when we got off the bridge. Besides, Alex, I know you've always wanted to come here. We shouldn't let my anxiety dictate our lives forever. We traveled through Terrytown and into Sleepy Hollow. I couldn't wait to explore. The movie and novel The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving was a favorite since childhood. Likewise, the tale of Ichabod Crane appealed to me. The leaves had already begun their transformation. Bright reds, oranges, and yellows were everywhere. The town was beaming with Halloween decorations, and there wasn't a single porch that lacked a skeleton or carved pumpkin. We finally reached our Airbnb. I finalized our itinerary, pulling out the must-see locations based on the book, while Lena freshened up. That evening, rested and ready to go, we headed to the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. It was still dusk as we visited the resting place of Washington Irving. Many tourists were already there when we arrived, eagerly chatting about the landmarks, and of course, the Headless Horseman, probably the most sought-after equestrian in town. We stopped and listened in on a tour guide explaining the legend. The legend of Sleepy Hollow's Headless Horseman dates back to the American Revolution. Many say the horseman was a German soldier who served the British Army during the war. He was killed during the Battle of White Plains in October of 1776, decapitated by an American cannonball. The shattered remains of his head were left on the battlefield, while his comrades carried his body away. Eventually, they buried him in the cemetery of the Old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow, from which he rises as a malevolent ghost, furiously seeking his lost head. As thrilling as the story was, it was all fiction. So, knowing this, Lena chuckled at the terrified visitors. These people are acting ridiculous. They actually believe the Headless Horseman is real. It's only a book, people. We both came here to have a good time. Even though we found ourselves holding kerosene lamps in a cemetery, it all still seemed so trope-like and cliché. The lamps lit our way while the tour guide showed us some of the famous residents laid to rest. William Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and Elizabeth Arden were popular stops along the way. The night air grew cooler since we were, after all, near the Hudson River. Finally, we wandered away from the group out of boredom and made our way into the darkness of the cemetery towards the bridge. Lena shivered and pulled her hands inside her jacket. Nope, not going near that old bridge. It's not even the original one, don't worry. It grew eerie as we watched the lights from the group drift away, while the moonlight peeked through the trees and across the headstones. We walked a little further past the bridge. Then, out of nowhere, we heard the whinny of a horse. We looked back and Lena screamed at the shape that loomed over a black steed. I rolled my eyes as it ran across the bridge. It was an actor meant to come out and scare the large group of visitors and sightseers. A unique opportunity to ride across the cemetery to heighten the already festive mood. Lena grabbed my right arm and interlocked it with hers. It's nothing, Lena, just an actor on a horse. I felt the need to play along and yelled out, "I say, good man, for whom are you looking?" The headless rider slowly trotted towards us. He was holding a jack-o'-lantern. "The tour guide and visitors are just ahead." We broke off from the group to have a little time to explore the cemetery ourselves and frolic amidst the tombstones. The horseman held his steed in place. It began to sway uncontrollably, whinnying in protest. Then it stood up on its back legs. The headless rider stood tall upon the steed and held on tightly. I was impressed. The actor was giving a very convincing recount of that glorious night chasing Ichabod Crane. Let's get out of here. We both started backing away, uncertain of the rider's intentions. I could feel no vibrations, but hear the large animal's hoofbeats as it began to canter towards us. Lena pulled her arm away and ran towards the bouncing lanterns, hundreds of feet ahead in a tinge of panic. I ran towards her to catch up. "Lena!" I exclaimed and began to run after her. From behind me, I could hear the hooves of the oncoming horse. The steed was in full gallop and heading straight at me, its rider bearing down its weight on the animal, pushed it to accelerate. I turned and watched in awe as the breeze made his flowing robe wave like a flag. He hurled the pumpkin right at me, but luckily I dodged in time. I continued my sprint towards Lena. A maniacal laugh grew from behind me. Lena ran further ahead, now within earshot of the tourist group. I could hear her scream at the visitors, who turned to see who had been crying out for help. But instead, she turned and pointed back at the headless horseman in pursuit of me. I ran faster, only to notice the horse's snout in my peripheral vision. The horse let out a large breath, and I felt the kick of the horseman's boot upon the back of my head as I fell to the ground. My kerosene lamp flew ahead of me, and I lay there, staring at the night sky in pain and disbelief. The group focused their attention on the headless rider as it kicked and pushed the steed faster ahead. They watched it approach and pass by them as if it were some sort of reenactment. Finally, the horse turned around and stood upon its back hooves while letting out a loud, raucous bray to warn the visitors. The sting of the horseman's boot was far from just performance art. It hurt. Lena ran towards me, as did the tour guide and a few other visitors who came to see if they could help. A thick line of blood ran down my face and neck. Everyone looked terrified.
Alex, are you okay?
From behind her, I saw the steed run at us again. I reached over, grabbing Lena's lamp, as the horse charged and tossed it at the rider. The lantern shattered across the rider's broad shoulders and appeared to catch on fire. The group stood in awe and applauded, watching the headless horseman ride away, trying to douse the fire that had taken to its clothes. Many had wondered if this was part of the retelling of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, but I knew he was real. I felt his anger and disdain manifest in the blood he drew. I didn't need anyone telling me the experience is fake or part of some staged event. I could tell by the pain in my head that the headless horseman was real, and we were trespassing on hallowed ground. Never in my life had I ever thought I could withstand a Halloween movie marathon. I ended up watching 11 films in a matter of 48 hours. I was glad that Michael Myers was in fact a fictional character, even though some say that he was actually from Haddonfield, New Jersey, which wasn't too far from me. The devilish young boy slaughtered his sister with a large knife on Halloween. Afterward, Michael spent many years in a mental institution, and on one rainy evening, stole a car and escaped into the darkness. And from then on, he hunted his sister Laurie for most of the films. John Carpenter's famous horror series was well known for its gory scenes and random killings. I felt as if each sequel had to find a way to top the previous one. Ellie, Bill, and I stepped outside into the cool evening air in Haddonfield, New Jersey. There was a Halloween party at our friend Matt's house. Matt always had the best parties ever since we were kids. Unfortunately, he was too busy to join our Halloween movie marathon. I was glad they were finally over, and looked forward to hanging out with friends from school. Those movies were cool. Michael always found a way to survive. Except for that third one. What was that all about? Yeah, the third one made no sense to me. Halloween 3 didn't even have Michael Myers in it. Nothing to do with the first two. Must have been a money grab, Bill said. I must admit, there were some creepy moments, and that music, ugh, I cringed. Ahead of us, the shape of a man stood staring at us. I hesitated for a second, then yelled at Bill and Ellie. It's him. Look. I pointed at the shape. They both raised their heads to see what I had screamed about, but nothing was there. It's a movie, Judy. Michael Myers doesn't exist. Ellie smiled. We turned the corner and were on Matt Street. Matt decorated his front yard like a cemetery. Several classmates were entering the house for the party inside. Bill, Eddie, and I made our way through the cemetery and onto the front steps. At the front door stood a Michael Myers. It looked so much like him, I felt like screaming. But before I could, Matt pulled off his mask and yelled, "Trick or treat!" Matt, just like you'd always have a trick up your sleeve, your costume's sick. We spent the past 2 days watching all 11 movies. Nearly scared Judy out of her mind. "I promise, Judy, I won't wear the mask when you're around," Matt assured me. "It's okay, Matt. I have to remember that Michael Myers is only a fictional character." I went inside the house. Many of our friends were dressed in creepy outfits and enjoying the party. Matt put his mask back on. He continued to greet others who walked up to the porch. A visitor had arrived, dressed as Michael Myers. How original. The visitor tilted his head and pulled a large carving knife out from his front pocket. Matt stood and inspected the knife as he moved it above his head. "That looks real. Where'd you find that?" With that, the stranger grabbed Matt and lifted him off the ground, and with a single motion, plunged the giant knife into Matt's throat. Bill, Ellie, and I ran out the back of his home and down the street as fast as we could. We hurried back home. Kids were screaming up and down the street, terrified at the murder that just occurred. Bill stopped to assure Ellie and me that it was all just a prank. But then, the killer appeared from behind him, jabbing the knife through one side of his right ear and out of the other side. Bill, stunned, stood bleeding until he collapsed. Ellie and I screamed. We took off looking for anyone who might be outside who could help us. We knew from the films that Michael was always looking to exterminate as many victims as he possibly could. Eddie and I took off towards Main Street. A police car sped past us towards Matt's house. Ellie stopped to take a breather, and I sat across from her on the grass. Was that Michael Myers? It appears to have been. I thought you guys said he was just a fictional character. Suddenly, all the blood left Ellie's face, and she screamed for us to run. And in a split second, Ellie's decapitated head flew onto the street in front of me. Her blood splashed on the road and onto my face. I looked back to find Michael Myers standing directly behind me, with a knife aimed at the top of my skull. I screamed at the top of my lungs, waiting to feel the steel of the knife pierce my head. But nothing. I looked around to find Michael Myers had vanished. For some reason, he turned around and headed towards a group of teenagers, and I ran straight home. Michael Myers had returned to Haddonfield, and no one knew how or why. All I knew was that I had to end him the same way he ended my friends. In a girl world, Halloween is the one night a year when a girl can dress like a total slut, and no other girls can say anything about it. The Mean Girls quote was forever drilled into my memory. My costume was going to be nice and simple. There's never enough time to put together the perfect costume. Dana and I had realized this since, once again, we were running behind schedule and our Halloween party was a week away. I'd rather not throw on lingerie and cat ears, but it requires zero planning. No, dressing up is serious business. I want to dress as a corpse bride. So we hit up all the local thrift shops and boutiques in search of a vintage-style wedding dress. And we didn't have much luck. Go figure. Either people weren't getting married often enough, or the dresses we did find were hideous. I'm sure I can ask my mom if you can borrow her dress. That won't work. It needs to be distressed. And I'm going to stain it with coffee, Dana said, defeated and ready to go. But right as we were about to leave, we saw one of the employees holding up a wedding dress. Dana immediately ran over to her. Yeah, we just received this box today. A lot of beautiful dresses too. Dana grabbed the dress and went to the fitting room to try it on. It was perfect, so she bought it and we left. Halloween night arrived, and Dana couldn't wait to show off her costume. She spent all day wearing the dress and tailoring it to perfection. It was pretty terrifying. Someone knocked on our front door. I'm going to put the finishing touches on my dress and makeup. Go ahead and let the guests in. I'll be down in a minute. I ran downstairs and let the guests in, and we had a full house in no time. I was handing out hors d'oeuvres when someone asked where Dana was. I looked at the time, and it had been an hour since I saw Dana getting ready upstairs. I left the party to go check on her. And when I opened the door, she was laying down on her bed, just like a corpse. Looks so realistic. Great job. I should tell Eric to come up here and bring you back to life. Silence. She lay there, still. And I realized she wasn't breathing. I tried to wake her up, but nothing. So I screamed for help. A few guests entered the room and laughed and clapped, thinking it was all an act. I screamed for them to call an ambulance, and that's when everyone started panicking. The ambulance arrived and took Dana's body away. After investigation, we found out that the wedding dress was poisoned by embalming fluid, which stopped Dana's blood flow after hours of wearing it. Its previous owner wore it to her wedding and funeral, until it was stolen from her corpse. From the moment I arrived, I knew Salem, Massachusetts was a special place. A cozy coastal town that was both charming and inviting. The witch trials of the 1600s made Salem the perfect place to visit during Halloween. I walked around town, taking in the various attractions as if some invisible string guided me. History was practically oozing from the walls, and from the ground, the blood of the innocent. It was a town infamous for the hanging and burning of those reported to have practiced black magic or witchcraft. I felt like I was coming home. I enjoyed the company of tourists, dressed in black robes and pointy hats in populated areas, but felt strangely comfortable in several of the locations where the trials took place and the executions carried out. As I stepped foot in the Salem Witch Trials Memorial, I heard a voice whisper in my ear, "Welcome home, dear." I shrugged it off and read the names. No one knew for sure why these small North Shore town settlers would condemn and convict their own. Yet the elders did just that. As I stood there, a sudden chill gave me goosebumps, and I collapsed to the ground. A dream, almost like a movie, began to play in my subconscious, and it felt like deja vu. I could see the elders packed inside a courthouse, reading the charges to men and women. They were reportedly practicing the devil's work by using black magic to impose their will on the townsfolk. I could see the elders casting judgment upon the accused and reading their deeds aloud to the court, then proclaiming a punishment upon them, which meant execution. On this particular day, there was a middle-aged woman sitting with her head down in shame and tears. She pleaded not guilty to all their accusations and charges, saying that her specter didn't appear to Martha Spragg or Rose Foster in the middle of the night, and that she didn't torment them. A moment later, I was transported. I stood in front of a tall tree with a large rope looped around a sturdy branch. I could see the woman bound by her hands with rope and dragged up a flight of stairs to a platform. Her face was dirty and her hair unkempt. She knew she had little time left and zero sympathy from the growing crowd. She cried in protest. "I swear this day that many others like me will visit this very spot and know the injustice you set upon me." A man placed the rope around her neck. An elder approached with a scroll and read out the charges aloud. "Mary Parker of Andover, you have been charged with practicing black magic and witchcraft. As you know, anyone who carries forth the devil's work is subject to death. May God take pity upon your soul." With that, the executioner tightened the noose around her neck. Mary screamed a loud no. She pushed her body weight backward, hoping to move the executioner away. The executioner kicked the stool. She dangled with her hands bound behind her back and fell with a violent snap. Mary's feet kicked violently at the night air, and she slumped, swaying back and forth as the rope tightened. She gagged and kicked. After a few minutes, her body expired, and the execution was complete. When I came back to my senses, I was standing over Mary Parker's memorial. Her public hanging took place on September 22nd, 1962. It was so surreal. I shuddered at the thought of such cruelty by the hands of men and women she may have trusted and loved. That night, I stayed at a local bed and breakfast. I woke up early the next morning, had breakfast, and headed out. Last night, Mary's death invaded my dreams. At one point, I could have sworn I woke up and saw her standing in the corner of my room, just staring at me.
What they did to me, to us, was inexcusable. Arresting me when I had just lost my husband. Accusing me of having afflicted victims with my touch. Torturing me by examining every inch of my body for the mark of the devil. Then murdering me. They tried to erase my bloodline, but they failed. Take what is rightfully yours, dear, and do not be ashamed of who you are. I am always watching. My soul will live on for generations to come.
I felt some strange connection to it all. I just couldn't figure out what it might be. As I was walking in town, the voice returned. "Go to the witch house." I headed straight there. The voice was strong and persistent. The witch house tour had started just minutes before, and I would need to sit and wait in an area until the group finished. As I stood waiting, I heard a strange noise. I turned around to find a book on the floor. I opened it and noted that it spoke of the witches by name and gave a brief overview of their crimes. I turned to the page that listed Mary Parker. It said that she was a widow during the time of the trials and from Andover. She also had a daughter named Sarah, 2 nieces, and a grandniece named Rebecca Johnson who were wrongfully accused and arrested for witchcraft. Luckily, they weren't executed. This stuck with me. I ran to my laptop and used websites that would help me piece together her possible genealogy. There was a Parker family tree that stemmed from Andover, showing the branches of children and grandchildren. I followed the tree down almost 300 years and felt a chill run up my spine. At the very last line was my grandmother's name and photograph. This is what happened on Halloween night 3 years ago, when one of my friends, well, you'll see. Even though me and my friends were adults, we still loved everything that came with Halloween. Beth loved the candy, I loved scary stuff, and Mindy, well, she just loved dressing up. Every year, the mayor would set up this elaborate parade and carnival right in the middle of town. It had amazing food, decorations, hired actors who would scare you, and the main attraction, the House of Horrors. Basically, you would go in and you'd walk through a maze, all the while being scared by skeletons, werewolves, and vampires. Yeah, it would normally be a lot of fun, but that particular year, it was something different. Come on, guys, what's taking you so long? I asked them while pacing back and forth in the living room. We were dressing up as the Sanderson sisters. Okay, we're ready, Mindy said as they both came down the stairs. Come on, let's go already, I said while opening the front door. As we walked out, we saw that everyone was outside. The kids were trick-or-treating, and the adults were all headed the same direction. We finally got to the carnival. The House of Horrors looked amazing. We went straight in. This is better than last year, Mindy said, and she was right. The corpses and puddles of fake blood had a really nice aesthetic. For Halloween, of course. There were also paid actors, scaring us and jumping out from the dark corners. Psst, we heard as we were walking. We looked around, but couldn't see anything. It was too dark. Psst, we heard it again. Mindy looked to her right, and a guy came out of the shadows. He was beautiful. The three of us were speechless. He had a pale complexion, long hair, blue eyes, and full lips. He was also really tall. So, you're a vampire, Mindy swooned. He also had a pair of fake fangs. Yeah, you look delicious, he said. Guys, you go ahead. I'm gonna hang out here for a while, Mindy told us. We didn't want to get between her and this beautiful guy, who seemed to like her, so we went ahead. After about 10 minutes, we were at the end of the maze, and the exit was right in front of us. But no sign of Mindy. Let's call her, I said while taking out my phone, but she didn't answer. Come on, we should go back for her, Beth told me, and I agreed. We did just that. As we walked, we noticed that the floor was wet. It was dark, so we couldn't see where the water was coming from. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. We both screamed. It was blood. So much blood was at our feet. Having the flashlight still turned on, we took a step to the right and accidentally pointed the phone towards a dark corner. There, with her eyes open and 2 holes on the side of her neck, laid Mindy. She looked dehydrated and pale. I started shaking her so that she'd come to her senses, but it was too late. Mindy was dead. We called the police, and after they did a full autopsy at the hospital, they saw that she was completely drained of her blood. After hearing that, Beth and I looked at each other with the same thought. The handsome stranger was a vampire, and he murdered our friend. This is a story about what happened on Halloween, before my husband and I decided to move out of our new house. I was 32 years old when I experienced something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. We had just moved into this really nice neighborhood after finally finding a house we absolutely loved. "We're going to be so happy here," I said to my husband while we spent our first night in the new place. It was around sometime in October, not long before Halloween night. We managed to make some friends on our block, and we learned that everyone decorated their houses during spooky season. Not wanting to be left behind, we decided to go shopping for some skeletons, pumpkins, and cobwebs. Anyway, time went on, and fast forward to a few weeks later, Halloween. The houses on our block looked really terrifying, but it was still daylight, and I could only imagine what they would look like at night. We didn't have any kids of our own. We tried, but it just didn't happen. Thus, our love for kids was immense. That's why we had several large bowls of candy ready to go. Our wish was not to run out and leave some of the kids behind. Finally, evening came and our first trick-or-treater. It was a little girl, accompanied by her dad. "Hello, what a beautiful princess costume," I said, smiling at her. "Thank you," she said, while replying with an even bigger smile. We gave her some candy and a feeling of joy came over us. The night went on and several other kids came, dressed up as vampires, witches, and superheroes. But the last kid that came, he was a little bit different. "Trick or treat," we heard a small voice say. I opened the door and there he stood. A small boy with a pale face, wearing an old-timey costume. He looked like a child from the 1940s. "What an original costume," I said, while handing him the bowl of candy so he could take as much as he wanted. "It's not a costume. Where's Matilda? Isn't she home?" the kid asked me. "Matilda? There's no Matilda living here," I said while looking confused. "Oh, yes she is. She's my mom's friend, and Andrew's mom. They live here," the kid said. I didn't know how to respond, so I just gave him more candy as he stood there. "I'm sorry, there isn't anyone by that name here," I told him nicely. "What's your name?" I asked. He paused for a moment, and then said, "Hector. Okay, I'm gonna go now," and left. The next day, I went outside to get the mail, and my neighbor was on her front porch. I went over to talk to her. "Hey, do you know Matilda with a kid named Andrew?" "There was a kid asking for her last night," I said. My neighbor was old, over 80, so I guess she would know what the kid was talking about. She thought about it for a while. "I remember when I was young, there was a fire on this block, a big one. 2 families died. And if I remember correctly, the houses were yours and the one next to it. If I'm not mistaken, a woman named Matilda lived in the house you moved into, and she did have a boy. They were close friends with the next-door neighbors, the Anderson family. They also had a kid. His name started with an H, I believe. Hector." When I heard the name Hector, I rushed home to research the fire. I found pictures of the family, and there he was. The 8-year-old boy named Hector. A picture of him looking identical to the kid I saw the night before. It wasn't long until my husband and I moved out of that house, hoping to never experience that sort of thing again. Back when I was still in high school, I used to be a member of the dance club along with my best friend Marciana. One day, there was a big event at school, and we had to perform. Everything ran smoothly until the main attraction, our dance number. It was one of the highlights of the evening. It was finally our time to perform on stage. Part of the choreography was to switch positions, in which we had to run through the backstage. Here's the catch. There were so many people backstage, all the other performers, makeup artists, models, assistants, and other staff members. We couldn't pass the narrow backstage in time. But there was one other way that Antonio, Marciana's boyfriend, the stage manager, taught us. To go below the stage. The school built that tunnel underneath the stage for this very reason, to make a way for performers to pass through. There was no lighting down there because it was still being constructed. So we took our phones out to light our way. When we were about to reach the other side, we saw an old hermit with a stitched up mouth and long beard and hair. In an instant, Marciana screamed and then collapsed. Antonio and I had to drag Marciana out. The performance was cut short, and she was rushed to the hospital. While we were walking home, Antonio was so angry because they told him he couldn't accompany her. He started punching whatever he could and throwing random objects he found on the ground. "Please don't. We'll just come back in the morning." Antonio stopped and tossed the stone aside into a nearby mound. In frustration, he approached, kicked, and destroyed it. A few seconds later, a light emanated from what was left of the mound. A small, bearded old man in black garments appeared out of nowhere. The old man looked at us with pure hatred in his eyes. Upon closer inspection, we noticed that his mouth was sewn up. We were about to scream and run, but he suddenly vanished right before our eyes. We rushed home since there was a heavy storm that followed. We had no idea that Antonio's carelessness would have such a horrific impact on our lives. The next morning, I suddenly got a text from Marciana. She said she was awake now, but not feeling well and vomiting a lot. It was followed by a phone call from Antonio. "Alex, I don't feel good," he said in a shivering tone. "Are you sick as well?" I asked. The line got disconnected. I felt dizzy when I tried to get out of bed, so I asked my mother to come to my room. "What is happening?" my mother asked. She was shocked when she removed my blanket. "Alexandra, your foot is swollen." I then realized I couldn't move my left foot. My mother quickly sent me to the hospital. My foot was x-rayed and I was given medicine. Days passed and my left foot didn't get any better. I also found out that Marciana was still sick, and worse, Antonio died. Antonio's death was mysterious, and no one knew what caused it. Doctors were unable to provide a diagnosis for sudden illnesses, and my foot had developed an aching wound and had tripled in size. Marciana sent me a picture showing she had grown too much hair all over her body. She developed a beard, which looked funny. But when she mentioned she was urinating a black liquid, I was really worried for her. It was all so bizarre. It was as if someone was trying to punish us. My mother took me to an albulario named Aling Bella. She founded a church which was built thanks to the donations of customers she was able to heal. She prayed before starting the healing ritual, lit a white candle, and pointed it towards a basin filled with water. The wax formed a black figure. "This is the cause of your pain. We need to hurry before it's too late. This old man is trying to kill you," she warned. She blessed my forehead, took the figure out of the basin, then covered it with paper and put it inside of an empty can. She sprinkled some holy water on top and covered it. "Boil this can for an hour for 7 days straight. Open it on the 7th day," Aling Bella instructed. My mother gave a 500 peso bill to Aling Bella, but she refused, saying her healing services were free of charge. "But you can put it in the donation box of the church," she said firmly as she handed her the donation box. "For her wound, apply this essential oil made from the finest herbs," she added while pouring it on my foot. "This will cost 500 pesos. When my mother handed her the money, I felt an itch on my foot. Aling Bella quickly handed me a bottle of medicine. "This is a natural side effect. It means it's working. Just use this to stop the itch. Anyway, this is free for my new best customer. You deserve it." She opened the bottle and rubbed liquid on the new rash on my foot. I felt a burning sensation. "If you cannot tolerate the burning sensation, just ice it along with this handkerchief, blessed by the Pope, only at a discounted price of 500 pesos. You didn't even have to go to Rome," she said as she offered the hanky to my mother. We quickly left as my mother sensed something was fishy. However, my wound seemed to have dried up ever since we went to Aling Bella's miraculous church. I phoned Marciana to tell her to try to go to the same church, but I was shocked by what her mother told me. Marciana became insane, as if possessed by a demon. What happened to my best friends? I wasn't able to visit Marciana as my foot was not fully healed yet. I just spent my days crying. Before the 7th day of boiling the can, I found out that it was opened and the figure was missing. We returned to Aling Bella's church the next day to tell her the can had been opened and my wound had worsened. There were worms inside. The church was closed to prepare for Mass, but since Aling Bella lived in a luxurious house next to it, she saw us and let us in. I was carried by my mother and put on the couch. My mother removed the gauze covering my wound and was surprised to see more worms. Aling Bella had a premonition. "You are being followed by the old man, Nuno Sapunso." Suddenly, a faint, popish laugh could be heard from behind us. The lights flickered, and when we turned around, we saw a little old man with a long beard dressed in black. His mouth was sewn shut, but he could speak without moving his lips. It was as if he was talking right into our minds. "You and your friends dare disrespect my home and completely destroy it." My mother knelt in front of him and apologized, but he refused. He spat on her instead, and the fluids from his mouth landed on her face. My mother hid her face behind her hands and screamed in agony. It burned. Aling Bella grabbed a crucifix and held it in front of the man, but the old man just grinned and pointed his ancient finger at her. Aling Bella suddenly twitched and was thrown and pinned on the wall. "You abuse the power that my kind gave you and use it for your benefit," shouted the small, evil man. The church shook as if there was a huge earthquake. Aling Bella was suffocating, as if someone was choking her. Then she passed out. My mother was still covering her face, now with only one hand as her other hand grabbed mine. "Please, sir, I'm very sorry for what we did. Please, don't hurt anyone anymore." I begged for forgiveness as tears rolled down my face.
"Finally, that's exactly what I needed to hear.
he said, then he disappeared. Since that encounter, we've been making offerings to the mound near our house. The mound's old man seems to have forgiven me. My mother's face had a scar which she can hide under some makeup. Marciana, my dearest friend, is gradually regaining her sanity, and her beard has stopped growing. Everything was back to normal. I always make sure I ask for permission when I pass by the mound and say, "Tabi tabi po." Kashima Raiko was walking quickly but apprehensively at the railway station in Hokkaido, Japan. She was bullied for being the new kid in school. On that day, she felt like someone was following her in the station, even though it was nearly deserted. She sped up while looking behind to make sure no one was there. Her heart was racing, and her instincts told her that her life was in danger. She made the decision to flee. Not far from where she started running, someone appeared and kicked her left shin, which immediately sent her crashing to the ground. Raiko cried out in pain while holding her scraped-up leg. When she looked up, she saw her new classmates grinning at her.
Who says we'll allow an ugly kid like you into our school? Said a girl.
Raiko bowed her head meekly. Please, I don't want any trouble. Just let me be. I want to go home, she pleaded. The two girls grabbed Raiko by the hair and dragged her near the platform. All she could do was cry in pain. Then they grabbed her hands and feet and threw her onto the tracks right when a train was approaching. And Raiko lost consciousness upon impact. The story goes that Raiko was split in half by the train. Her lower body was shredded to pieces. The violent nature of her death turned her into an onryo, or vengeful ghost, known as the Teke Teke. The Teke Teke took the lives of the two girls who bullied her by splitting their bodies in half. It is said that the name comes from the sound of her nails clawing on the ground as she chases her victims. This is the story of how I know the Teke Teke. It's because bad luck follows me wherever I go. My parents died in a car accident when I was little, and that changed everything. I survived the accident, but was left scarred for life. No, I actually have a scar on my face. No child should ever have to go through that kind of trauma and loss. Fast forward to several years later, I moved in with distant relatives, which included my second cousin. After constantly moving around, I hoped this would be more long-term. At first, my cousin Yuko was welcoming. We were the same age and in the same classes. But after her boyfriend Koji introduced himself to me, she instantly became jealous and avoided me unless it was to remind me that I should be grateful that she took me in. After school one day, Koji caught up with me to ask how I was adjusting. He took my heavy bag and told me he would carry it for me since he was coming over to study. You shouldn't go home by yourself. It's dangerous around here at night. I'll try to convince Yuko to let you join us. Yuko came out of nowhere, grabbed my bag and opened it. She inspected the contents before emptying it out. My books fell to the ground, along with a photograph of my parents. Koji picked it up and asked, "Are they your parents?" I nodded. Yuko took the picture, looked at it, and tore it to pieces. No wonder you're ugly. I got down on my knees and gathered my books, as well as the remnants of my parents' photo. Stay away from my boyfriend. She threw my bag on the ground and stormed away. Koji helped me pick up my belongings, which were now dirty. Yuko called him over, and after a moment of hesitation, he apologized and left. I kept my distance from Yuko after that. We lived in the same house, but were complete strangers who didn't acknowledge one another's existence. Slowly, things became a little better. I made a few friends and even joined clubs. I was most excited for the creative writing one. Ever since I was little, writing stories where I'm the main character has always been how I cope with life. But lo and behold, Koji had also joined the club. As soon as he saw me, he ran over and sat next to me. I must admit, he was quite handsome, and I had developed a tiny crush on him after seeing him at home so often. "Hey, I'm sorry about Yuko," he quietly said. "We shouldn't be talking. Why are you even here?" "I enjoy writing. It allows me to escape even for a moment." "Yeah, I'm sure you need that." When we were done for the day, classmates told me to be careful because supposedly there was a murderer on the loose. A few girls around my age had gone missing, last seen walking around the railway station. "I can accompany you. I'll just pretend I had to pick up something at your place." For a brief moment, I had forgotten that Koji was dating my cousin and stopped by whenever he wanted. As enticing as it sounded to have him walk me home, I couldn't. "Please don't. Yuko would kill me." Koji shrugged his shoulders as I walked away. I made it to the railway station safely. For precaution, I quickened my pace during my walk and kept a low profile. It was late, and the station was deserted. All I could think about was Koji, how we probably had more things in common than him and Yuko, how I always catch him looking at me from the corner of my eye. After entering the train platform, someone punched the back of my head. It was then accompanied by the sound of a glass bottle shattering on my head. Blood gushed out as I fell to the ground. I was disoriented and about to black out when I heard Yuko's voice. "You think you belong here?" Yuko turned me over to face her. She spat on my face. I was dizzy. I wasn't able to reply. And this made her angry. "This one deserves to experience at least one fleeting moment of excitement in her life before we end it." "No knife today, hun." Koji grabbed me by the hair and started dragging me. "Goodbye, cuz," she uttered, then picked up both my feet. "Too bad no one will miss you." I was pleading for them to stop when I heard the train approaching. I looked at my cousin while tears rolled down my cheeks, trying to find even just a dash of reluctance or sympathy. But all I saw was pure evilness in her eyes. Then, in an instant, she was split in two. Her upper half was sliced off from her lower half so effortlessly. Her blood spilled out. Her lower body was still standing when her upper body fell. I just froze. Koji screamed and finally let go of my hair. The sudden and gruesome death of Yuko didn't immediately register in my brain. I stared at the two halves. It was horrifying. I had to look away. Then it hit me. The killer was still there. When I looked up, there was a demon-like creature that was also missing her lower body. She was wearing old, tattered, soiled clothes and had long black hair. In her right hand was a scythe, which she used to split Yuko in half. I was too stunned to speak and didn't dare move an inch. She dropped the scythe and moved towards me by clawing the floor. Her movements were odd and unreal. Her claws were making a unique sound when they hit the floor. The sound was something like a tick-tick. She stopped an inch away from me, grabbed my face, and looked directly into my eyes. Surprisingly, I found more humanity in hers. I shivered from the touch of her cold, clammy skin. Suddenly, she licked the side of my face from my chin up to my forehead. She let go of me and looked at Koji. He took a step back. The creature grinned and quickly pushed herself from the floor towards him as he ran away. She landed on his back and clawed open his neck. Blood gushed from his gaping wound as he fell to the ground. And she didn't stop there. She got on top of him and started clawing on his belly until his upper body was separated from his lower body. It's strange because I didn't feel sorry for them. Afterwards, the creature took a quick glance at me and smiled. She took off to the dark corner of the train station and disappeared. Only after this incident did I learn about the urban legend of the Teke Teke. And I am forever grateful that the Teke Teke saved my life that day.
The scariest experience I've ever had? Well, let's go back to my days in the most beautiful regions in all of Colombia, Los Llanos. When my husband was still alive, he was an asshole, a huge one. He was raised in a broken home, grew up watching his drunk father beat his wife and cheat on her time and time again. And you know what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We all believe in the animas of Los Llanos, dark spirits that punish those disrespecting life. Murderers, cheaters, and of course drunkards usually end up punished by these souls. In my opinion, El Silbón might be the scariest of all, also known as the Whistler. The version of this story that I grew up to was that it was once a man who committed murder after coming home from work and finding his father abusing his beautiful, loving wife. Apparently, the father was calling her a whore. He was then condemned to death by his own grandfather for the murder, first by lashes to the back by a group of men, then the sharp teeth of starved, monstrous dogs eating his remains. The second version was that El Silbón was once a very spoiled boy who lived on a farm. He wanted his father to hunt for deer, as venison was his favorite food. When the father didn't, the boy killed him, taking out his organs and giving them to his mom to cook. The mother had no idea, and they ate the father's heart and liver. Once the mother found out, she cursed her son and he ran away. Either way, afterward, he became a vengeful spirit, killing womanizers and drunkards, or really anyone who dared hear his whistle at night. Imagine a giant carrying the bones of the father he killed, wandering during the night in the vast grasslands, appearing to those who have effed up, then killing them. I faced this being. It was a holiday and everyone was celebrating and drinking. My husband and I were newlyweds. He was a good man up to this point, quite charming. The problem that night was that he got wasted, and we had an awful argument. It's funny because I don't even remember what we fought about, but it was the first time he ever laid his hands on me. Right after, he left me to go to the town square, where the fiesta was at its peak, so I went home and started packing my bags to leave him. I learned later that his close friend Andres saw him too drunk to walk in a straight line. He was an angry and messy drunk. Once the festivities died down, everyone went straight home. In the middle of the night, while everyone was fast asleep, a horrifying scream echoed throughout the town, followed by an eerie whistle. Multiple neighbors came out to see what had happened, but when we gathered at the site of the scream, we realized something atrocious. My husband was lying on the street,
covered in vomit and blood, and an open wound in his stomach. I made my way through the crowd and asked him what happened. All he could do was whisper, "El Selbon." We tried to rush him to the doctor, but it was too late. Too much blood had left his body, and he died. Honestly, I was a bit relieved after his passing. It made leaving him much easier. I was now a young widow, focusing on myself, making some money, and taking a long break from men. Or I tried. One night, I was headed home after a day of working at the market. I know it isn't safe for a young single woman to walk alone at night, but it was a short commute. I hummed to myself to keep my mind distracted. Then I heard a whistle, and the catcalling started. I turned around. It was my husband's friend, drunk out of his mind. Andres ran up to me and started complimenting me, but in a very aggressive way. Then he asked me if I wanted to go home with him. I told him he was too drunk to form any logical thoughts. I walked faster, looking around and hoping someone could help me. But we were all alone. He kept saying very inappropriate things to me, and when he realized I was ignoring him, pushed me to the ground. I was panicking. He sounded and acted just like my late husband. Then I heard another whistle from a distance. Another drunkard? I had enough. Andres got off me but lost balance and fell to the ground. I looked around, but it was dark. All we could hear was the sound of something being dragged. Then a tall figure jumped out from behind a tree and attacked Andres. El Selbon. I remembered what my family told me growing up. When the whistle sounds far away, it is actually close by. It appeared out of nowhere, tearing Andres into bits and pieces by removing his bones one by one. Then the creature put its sack on the ground and started counting all the bones he had accumulated. I was too afraid to move. I sat there, listening to the sound of the bones clacking. I watched its every move, trying to think of an escape. It was a very emaciated giant, almost like a half-skeleton, half-scarecrow, in tattered farmer's clothes and a sun hat on top of its stringy hair. Looking at the creature made me feel a bit sad, because of its lost, empty facial expression. When El Selbon finished its task, it started whistling again. My heart started racing and my palms started sweating. I thought I was either going to have a heart attack or pee myself. Was I next? But it walked away. I sat there, shaking and relieved once again. I remembered. When the sound of the whistle is close to you, you are safe. As I stepped outside, all I could see was the gray mist brought from the fog that had swept over my village. There was a certain eeriness roaming in the cool air, but the gloominess was nothing too out of the ordinary during this time of the year. The silence was deafening, as my neighbors were safe at home. Not a single soul dared roam around once the sun set. The adults in the village warned their children not to go near the lake. There had been numerous stories of victims falling into the nearby lake and drowning, believed to have been caused by the buck. Krish, my classmate, was missing for 2 weeks now. I lived with my dad at the time. He was a fisherman. Before my dad left for work, he set some traps in the lake behind our house to catch fish, and told me to check on it as soon as I finished classes. 3 hours later, I had completely forgotten and knew he would be upset when he got back. So I went out to check on the traps. I slowly walked towards the lake. Once I reached the water, I searched for the traps. Suddenly, I saw something poking out of the lake. A boy around my age. Krish. He was crying. I walked closer to him to get a better look, and so that I could ask him a whole bunch of questions. But as I got closer, he slowly submerged his head underwater. At first, I thought it must have been my imagination. But then I thought he was drowning. So I dived in. There was no sign of him. I didn't know what the heck was going on, but I needed to leave. But when I was getting out of the lake, my hand was grabbed and my body was pulled back in. I couldn't even scream as it happened so fast. When I checked what had grabbed me, I saw that Krish had changed. In his place was this grotesque, muddy-looking creature, and its skin felt slippery and cold. Luckily, my hand managed to slip away. I kicked it and got out of the water. When I looked back, the dark silhouette had already climbed out and was now standing there, just staring at me. The creature jumped towards me, grabbed my leg, and started pulling me. I tried to fight it off. I was covered in mud and the ground was slippery. Then the creature jumped into the water and tried to drag me in with it. But it got caught by one of the traps my dad had set up. My dad ran out the back door. The creature managed to escape and dive back into the water. My dad confirmed that it was the buck. He was trying to catch and destroy it. It was the day of Diwali, and my village was decorated for this elegant festival of light. It's the day to remember that light triumphs over darkness and good over evil. In the evening, the women of the village lit up the oil lamps, while children ran around with huge grins.
Mom, I told you, I'm not interested in celebrating such an absurd idea of good and evil and demons and gods. I'm not going,
I told my mom. She looked very disappointed. They didn't understand. All they knew was this village life, when the world out there is huge. You shouldn't talk to me like that. I know what's best for you, she replied to me. I ran to my room and slammed the door shut. There was this fair in my village that takes place during Diwali. My family has gone every year, but I'm grown now. I would much rather stay home and be productive. My mom lit up the oil lamps around the house, while my family got ready for the fair. I looked at the time. It was 9 p.m. I turned on music and scrolled through my phone. My mom knocked on my door. Honey, we're going to the fair. Stay safe. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone, even if you hear us. We have the keys. Yes, Mom. Don't worry. I could hear their footsteps fade away. I looked out my window. It was luminous where the fair took place. Other than that, the oil lamps in the village started to die down. I looked at the oil lamp outside my house. Only 3 of them were burning, and it looked like they were about to go out. I watched as one went out. Only 2 left. I could hear the eerie evening breeze. The second light went out, and as the outside got darker, the rustling of the wind became louder. The last oil lamp was almost burning out now. I could see the flame flickering. I was concentrating on the flame when I saw the shadow of a hand cover and extinguish it. My mind must have been playing tricks on me, I thought to myself, and went to bed. I took out my phone and started scrolling nervously. Then I heard a noise come from the kitchen. The sound of stuff falling on the floor. I tried to ignore it, and it stopped. After about 20 minutes, I had forgotten about the noise and was back to scrolling on my phone, until I heard another noise come from the kitchen. Mom, is that you? No one answered. Then I heard someone say my name. Pusha. Mom? I walked towards the kitchen, but no one was there, and nothing was on the floor. I saw that the front door was left open. I went over to close it, and I saw a figure resembling my mom standing near the trees. Mom, what are you doing there? She slowly walked away. Mom, stop. I ran towards her as she walked towards the trees. I thought maybe it was someone else. Mom, what's going on? Where is everyone? She kept walking away as I followed her, until we were in the middle of the forest, and no one was around. Then she stopped and slowly turned around. I looked at her and saw that her feet wasn't touching the ground. As I slowly looked up, I got a good look at her. She wasn't my mom. Her skin, gray and ashy with bulging white eyes. I fell on my back as I tried to run away, and she flew towards me. I started screaming and closed my eyes and prayed as it got closer to me. I heard footsteps running towards me, and as I opened my eyes, I saw that it had disappeared. A few of my neighbors surrounded me, holding their lit-up lamps and praying. They must have returned from the fair, heard me screaming, and came to the rescue. I saw it. It was flying towards her. It was Nishi Duck, one of the villagers said. They took me home and waited for my family to return, since I was petrified. I learned a big lesson from my mistake, that I should listen to my parents. Culture and beliefs in our society are there for a reason, and we shouldn't ignore or disrespect them. There is good and evil and light and darkness in everything. Arish lived with his grandmother in a village in Kolam. His grandmother was old school and superstitious. Arish tried to convince his grandmother to join him in the city. Moving there would mean a life that was much better for the two of them. He tried to urge her, but she kept saying no. Her reasoning was because this was the place she grew up in. There was history there. He could never convince his grandmother, who was so emotionally and spiritually connected to the village. She even said he could go on his own, but he could never leave his grandmother. She raised him after his parents passed away when he was just a kid. Adish gave up on trying to convince her. He knew it wasn't going to work and he'd have to stay here with her. Defeated, he headed to work. He was already running late and told her to take care of herself while he was gone. He walked towards the front door and headed to work. And his grandmother urged him not to work too hard or too long. It wasn't safe out there. I'll try. He had to work long hours due to lack of employees in his office, and it took about an hour to drive to work. After his shift was over, Adish walked out of his office exhausted. He looked at his watch and noticed that it was already 10 o'clock. He got in his car and drove back home. It was pouring as he drove on the very empty street that night, and as he drove, the scent of fresh jasmine loomed in the air. He stopped all of a sudden when he saw a gorgeous lady walking in beautiful traditional attire in the middle of the road. She was dressed in a white sari and almost looked like a bride. He got out of the car and asked if she was okay. She told him she needed help walking home because her dress and shoes were soaked. Adish didn't hesitate and walked her home. She lured him towards a tree. She excitedly said she would make him dinner for his help and asked for lime. Adish felt in his heart that something was wrong, but he was too tempted. She stood in front of him and he reached his hand out to try and grab her face. All of a sudden, her teeth grew into long, sharp fangs. She jumped on him and tried to bite his neck. But when her fangs touched his skin, she hissed and jumped onto one of the palm trees. He immediately rushed back home and told his grandma everything. His grandmother was calm and told him that no one can touch her grandson. She said as she pointed towards the necklace he always wore around his neck. She gave it to him years ago, and that is what saved him from the ghost, Yakshi.
We never know how we'll react to our greatest fears until we're forced to come face to face with them. That was certainly the case for these two friends. Lara and Maria were young women living in Barcelona. They always loved horror stories. I don't know what I should read next, Maria said while walking next to her best friend. Why don't you try something by Emilio Bueso? Lara asked. I don't like Spanish writers. I prefer something more mainstream. We have great Spanish writers, Maria. She felt that her friend didn't always share the same interests as her. How about we go to your house today and look up scary stories? Have a horror-themed night. Lara suddenly remembered a story she came across a few days ago. It had been circulating around their school. The hairs on her body stood up. Do you know the legend of the blind maiden? Lara asked as she walked beside her friend. The blind maiden? What's it about? It's popular on the internet. We can read it together and test it out, she said with an intense look. When the two friends arrived at Laura's house, Maria was very excited about the story they were going to read. I'm curious, let's read it now. We have to wait until midnight, Lara responded with a monotone voice. Why? I know it's horror, but it doesn't have to be read at night. I guess we can. Do you know that there is a new moon tonight? It's absolutely necessary for this to work. New moon? Maria asked, intrigued. When the moon is invisible. I see, but what does that have to do with the story? Maria was confused. Come, let's read the story. Laura took her friend's hand and led her to the bedroom. The two friends sat at the computer and began reading. The story was like many other internet legends, which served to keep people up at night. Is that why you were talking about the moon? Do you actually believe this is true? Maria asked. We could try. You can spend the night here. Laura was excited.
But it says you have to be alone. And with the lights off at midnight on a moonless night? I know, Maria. I know it perfectly. Laura interrupted. Have you ever tried it? No. Are you afraid? We're just going to rehearse it. Okay. Maria sighed. She was concerned about her friend's sanity. A few hours passed. They had dinner and watched a horror movie to set the mood. At 11:55, Laura stared wide-eyed at her friend. It's time. Let's go to the computer, she said with half her face hidden by the darkness of the room. The girls sat together, staring impatiently at the computer. They found the website that was mentioned in the story and tried to access it. Nothing happened. I knew nothing would happen. You have to do it alone, Maria said, relieved. I know. This has helped us prepare, though. We have the website now. Let's try it separately tomorrow and then share our experiences. I guess we can try, Maria said, avoiding her friend's eyes. The next day, the girls woke up and went to their university. They didn't speak about what had happened the night before. In fact, they didn't speak much that day. Maria tried to avoid Laura. However, when they were dismissed from class, Laura caught up with Maria at the exit. Hi there, Laura said, very excited. Hi there. Maria was glad to see her friend acting like her usual self again. Tonight's the night we visit the Blind Maiden website on our own, Laura stated. Yeah, Maria answered when she saw that her friend wouldn't forget the deal they made. It will be a moonless night again, so we have to try it. It's super exciting. Laura was eager to get home. Okay, let's call each other once we finish, Maria said anxiously. When Laura got home, she sent a message to her friend at 11:55 p.m., reminding her of the rules for the optimal experience. It's almost time. Make sure you follow the rules. Maria just responded with an okay. Laura left her phone on the bed. She didn't want anything to distract her. She sat in front of the computer with the lights off, and as soon as she saw the time in the corner of the monitor, she accessed the website. The screen was blank at first. Nothing happened. Suddenly, there were strange images. Quick flickers of frames with different faces, some of them eyeless children. One after the other, twisted with fear and mouths wide open. They were deformed faces with torn up skin and empty eye sockets, full of blood and darkness. The mouths of these people were grimaces of pain, while blood trickled down from what was left of their eyes. The images were terrible. Laura didn't know if they were real or photoshopped. Just thinking about those victims made a chill run through her body. She enjoyed that feeling of terror, that irrational fear from which she could not escape. Immediately, the images on the screen stopped, and a message appeared.
This website will take you to a whole new level of horror, a horror that will use all 5 of your senses. You must be very careful not to click on anything by accident. You will be faced with a real experience of absolute horror.
Below the text were 2 buttons, the option to accept or decline. The narrator warned the visitor not to click accept and advised clicking decline for safety. Laura smiled slightly. She loved that feeling of fear. The same feeling she got when she watched a good horror movie or read a book that kept her up at night. Of course, she clicked accept. The screen went blank again, but a moment later, Laura froze. The fear she now felt was very different, dangerous. Before her eyes, on the computer screen, was a dark figure moving slowly down a dark hallway. Laura couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her eyes widened. To her surprise, she observed on her monitor the silhouette walking inside her house. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare. She wished it was a nightmare. She couldn't take her eyes off the screen. The humanoid shadow with bony arms and legs kept walking, examining each door she passed. Paralyzed by fear, Laura couldn't move a muscle and watched as the specter approached the very room she was sitting in. Laura felt the greatest of terrors while the silhouette opened the door. Laura saw on the computer screen how the figure walked to a person who was sitting in front of a computer. The room was familiar. On her screen was her very own back. The pores of the skin on her back and shoulder prickled. This was her own room, and someone was watching her from behind. Laura didn't know what to do. She saw how the terrifying figure approached her back and raised her hands to grab her. She felt the muffled breaths on the back of her neck. Her instinct was to turn around to see if there was really someone else in her room. She felt a presence behind her, but was too scared to turn around. Then she felt a tap on her shoulder. She faced the fear and turned around quickly to see the face of an eyeless woman. The last thing she saw before she died was the face of a blind maiden staring at her mercilessly with empty eye sockets, mumbling something she couldn't quite make out, then piercing her eyes with her sharp fingernails, digging and ripping them out of her sockets. And before leaving, taking a snapshot of her face so that it would forever be a part of the website's photo gallery. Maria stared at her monitor. Only 3 rules to make sure this was a success. You must be alone, check. You must turn off all your lights, almost check. She was too scared to turn off her desk lamp. And visit the website at midnight on a moonless night. Well, it was now 12:05. She had been debating whether or not she wanted to participate in Laura's silly game. Fine. Maria turned off her lights and went on the website. The screen was blank at first. Nothing happened. Then suddenly, one after the other, her screen was flooded with a collection of images of different victims with their eyes gouged out and facial expressions of silent screams. And then the site froze on one photo. Laura, followed by a pop-up message. Maria declined.